Yuan, and we also have a new guest on with us today. I'll let you introduce Doug here.
Okay, we are honored to have a friend of mine to be a guest on our show. And Doug, he has many titles. I have a series of his cards now. Let me read some. His day job, chapter vice president for our city, the American Institute of Parliamentarians. Could you introduce something about it?
Parliamentarians is important to every organization that has rules regarding their meetings. From every organization from the United States Congress down to your local club and civic organizations. They have rules about presenting motions, making amendments, and acting on them.
So the so-called Robertson's rules, is that related with this?
Robert's rules of
Robert's
order.
rules,
yes,
of order. Okay.
Okay, and they were an important part of American history. Back in the 19th century, Robert's rules became the first official set of parliamentary rules that adopted by the United States Congress, and so that is partially responsible for what you now see America today.
Okay, and also partially responsible for the gridlock.
And they are even debating that as they speak. The rules of order shouldn't create gridlock, and that I got involved in the organization to help figure out why.
All right, I hope you do that early. And another title of Doug is that he is the Taylor County Republican Party's precinct chairman, and also are the convention chairman of one of the conventions. Yeah,
that's correct.
Right.
Every precinct has a convention, as well in the state of Texas, as well as a county convention before the state and national conventions. So it's part of that buildup to electing delegates at the national convention, which has been a very hot topic in the news.
What kind of turnout do you guys usually have on those kind of?
Very low.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Yeah, that's kind of the sad state of where we are.
Only those who are interested go, and many people just okay with it, let it be.
The state of Texas actually has the largest state party convention in the world, 9,000 delegates, and I was one of them in 2014. They have them every 2 years.
Okay.
Okay.
I always wondered what exactly the process of being a delegate, how that exactly works. Because you were talking about the rules of order. That's always been very interesting for me. Is just to kind of get an understanding of how exactly Congress works on the legal level, as far as, like you were saying, making those amendments and things like that. What's the process of doing something like that? Is it a congressman comes to you guys and starts talking about a bill he wants to get passed, or is it something similar to that?
You're mostly right. Every bill that Congress passes has to start somewhere. And usually it's on the local level where somebody has an idea or a problem that they want to solve. The most recent example of that might be the incident involving the killing of a innocent woman on the streets of California by a illegal immigrant.
Okay.
Okay, and then there was basically that problem got steamrolled by a group of people that were in agreement that something needed to be done. And so somebody finally put pen to paper and said, let's make a law about that, and put it before a committee. And then a committee reports to the organization. It doesn't have full authority to make that law.
Right.
But the committee, every member of Congress is assigned to a committee. And so if there's 10 people on that committee, they have to vote on that, whether it's worthy to merit the large organization to go for a vote. Right. And then even then, it can be voted down by the President of the United States if it doesn't meet a certain vote total, 60%.
So where does that gridlock come into play? Is that coming into play in those committees, or is it on the floor?
It can vary. Even now, like the Supreme Court nominee that Obama has put forth, the question is can Congress move ahead on that? And there's been statements on both sides of the party saying, oh yes we should,
right, and
no we haven't.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the gridlock. Well, nothing ever will get done if we can't come to an agreement. The fact is under parliamentary rules, the most common rule that everybody needs to understand is that the majority rules.
Right.
Okay? You can't have disagreement and no one lose. Somebody has to win or lose. And
Right.
there is winners and losers. In pantheism, sometimes there's no, when we move that to a religious connotation, there is the philosophy that everyone is treated equally.
You mean pantheism?
Okay. Pantheism.
Pantheism, yes. Yeah, pantheos, all are God. Pan is all, theos is God, so all is God. Everything is God, and we're part of God.
I got you.
That's
kind of the namaste kind of.
Yeah, namaste, yeah.
So right now, what's going on with the Supreme Court nominee is the Republican Party is in the majority, and they, as long as they stick together, then their decision will prevail.
Okay, well, as far as I know, the Democrat Party have done the same before. When they were the majority, they stayed, and they said, we don't discuss the nominee by a Republican president until the next president comes in, which is probably a Democrat. And they have done it before. So now they're saying, well, you shouldn't do that, but they have done it before. So if it's allowed before, it should be allowed now, right?
That's where the media plays also a part in these decisions, and they can marginalize either side, and that's and then you can affect the public, and then the public can have a turn back.
Well, as far as I know, that media, most of the mainline media leaning left, so that most of the talk radio lean right. So it's really what kind of media do you take? Now they have been so specialized.
I think the difficult thing for me to understand, and as far as Congress goes, is when do we move out of this pointing the finger and nobody wanting to reach across? Like they always say, reach across the aisle, but I mean literally nobody wants to talk to each other. There are senators and congressmen that refuse to talk to anyone.
I don't think so. I think all of them, after their show, pointing the finger, they go to the cafe and they eat, drink together. So actually, they are a cabal of people that are together in a sense of ruling America. But they have to show that they are loyal to some principles or their base constituents on the air. But other than that, and actually,
I just wonder how dangerous it is for our country to be running that way. It just seems so inefficient from what we've been in the past. We've always been able to kind of stand together and get problems solved and move forward. And for the past 10 years, we've kind of been in this deadlock where nothing's being done. The things that are being talked about are kind of pushed under the rug and saved for later. And we're stuck in this constant cycle of, the Republicans are bad, well, the Democrats are bad. And it's this fight between the two.
Right. And so is anybody to blame here? And if we have parliamentary rules that says the majority rules, who is the top majority party in our government today?
Right.
And it's a sitting Democrat. So can you put the record on the president and saying, he's not been able to do it. And he has admitted at the last State of the Union, right?
Right.
Where he wish he could have done more, but that's kind of a weak...
Well, it's the American government that have made it gridlock. I think gridlock is not necessarily a bad thing. When the American people want to make something work, they will give a one-party, straight occupancy of the White House, the Senate majority, and the House majority. In that case, things will get done. When the American people are not united in what should be done, then one party going to have one side, the executive, and the other side have the other, and then that won't be done. So basically, gridlock is what the will of the American people. So we should not blame the gridlock. If you want to blame anything, blame American people.
Well, no, I say the same thing because that's one thing I always tell people. They complain about the president and so on. And I'm like, well, you do understand that it takes Congress and the Senate for a lot of these things to happen. And if you're not voting at a local level, even in your own community or in your state elections, then you can't lay all the blame on just the president. You have to look at things objectively and say, okay, well, if I want something done in my area, then I need to elect the officials that are going to do this for me.
That's right. And participation in the process.
Yeah, that entire process is kind of dissolved, if you will. And it seems like with my generation especially, they just don't have any want to take part in that or really try to understand it. And that's why I'm glad we had you on the show, because you are kind of in that. And I think it would be good to just explain the process of that voting, you know, in those preliminary votes, like what we're going through right now, trying to choose a nominee. And even when I tell people, like the big conversation I've been having this week with people is the fact that they did stop Donald Trump from speaking in Chicago. Now, I'm not saying I agree with what he's saying. I'm not saying that I like what he's saying, but he has the right to say it. And when you start bringing up that subject of what's harmful to say and trying to nitpick what you can and can't say on stage in a free speech environment, you start to remove that free speech. And I think it's something that just kind of goes over people's head. I don't think they realize that whenever you start to fight like that and petition, or not petition, but to rally and to stop somebody from speaking, you are in turn stopping one of your own rights. You're slowly giving way to that.
Well, you make several very interesting points, because yes, this parliamentary procedure is all about how to conduct meetings so that everybody gets heard. And unfortunately, though, we have a situation where words can hurt and people take offense to certain things. And in Christendom, we know that we are taught that we have to endure and not react to insults and accusations. So the idea of Christendom often has a big effect in calming down the rhetoric that takes place in these things. The other thing that I've learned in making arguments, which is, you know, debate often plays a part, is you hear alternate messages from each side. You never give one person the entire floor all of the time. And that's a big problem with the media, is it tends to favor one thing. In fact, there's been some legislation proposed to say all media outlets have to give equal sides to everybody.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, I'm sure after this election cycle, I mean,
no, that's not. I don't think it can be done, and I don't.
It would be very costly to implement.
Yeah.
Yes, but the idea of groups debating on an issue says you alternate other sides until everybody's either heard enough and somebody calls for the vote, or that you keep doing until you reach a solution to either amend what you're trying to do so that everybody is comfortable with it, which is what happened in a founding of our Constitution, and said these rights are self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights.
All of those came from the Bible, actually. The respect of life, marriage, and property. That's the basic rights of justice. Okay, and the Constitution reflects that worldview. And
but that only came about as a result of open debate and fair debate. The question is do we hear fair debate?
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like we do anymore. And even the debates that are had, there's such a show, kind of a facade, if you will, when you watch them, because there's nothing real being spoken about. I think at least as an informed person, you know, not everybody is informed. You know, we do have the masses, and there are a lot of people out there that are uninformed. But for someone like myself, when I watch that, I see right through it, and I'm just like, what are these guys doing? They're completely fake. They're characters up on a stage. They're not talking about anything.
Right, and let me give you an example of that, where I was able to use my Christian knowledge and training to point that out. 3 years of being a financial person, I always hear this demagoguing going on about the financials not having a budget and what turmoil our country is in. The Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, Jack Lew, made a statement which seemed odd to me. He said, I'm all out of options, and so we needed to increase our debt limit, right? Congress, and they recently approved a big increase in the debt limit. And if you are a logical thinker, and everybody wants to be one of those, well, if that's true, then what's the other side? Okay, and then nobody was really answering that question, is what is the other side? But I began to think about it. Well, the other side is we have to borrow that money. And who controls our borrowing? It's not the banks, but it's what's called the bond rating agency. And Standard & Poor's and Moody's are both bond rating agencies for U.S. government bonds, which is where we sell our bonds on the open market to get money to fund our programs.
And what exactly are those bonds? I mean, are they almost like an IOU of some sort?
Yes, it is.
Essentially.
So China buys all of our bonds, or even you or I can buy U.S. savings bonds, and ultimately that keeps our government healthy. That's the way our economic system. But before I finish that thought, let me say one other thing. James Madison in the Federalist Papers addressed the gridlock, what may be causing the gridlock in his Federalist Papers in number 62. He said that woe to the country when the rules change so quickly and so fast that people don't know what they are day to day.
And that's the problem now. This country is changing the rules of economy and trade, and so much so that the private company, they don't know how to react. They cannot plan
security, flow of information.
They cannot plan for long term. And
I know even the IRS constantly changes their system. I mean, sure, as a CPA, you know that you have to keep up with all that good stuff. But I know they constantly change the ways that you have to enter certain things.
Yeah, that's why every year we have to buy new software to do our taxes. But to go back on a certain point, I feel sometimes we easily fall for the demagoguery side, either left or side. And some things, when the demagogue says, they always just emphasize the right side or the wrong side. They don't give the balanced view. Okay, and for example, we all say U.S. debt is bad, the bad, and the bond is bad thing. But on the other hand, the government does need to have some way of running things. The kings in the ancient, not medieval time Europe, the kings borrow money from the banks, Rothschild and so on. The kings borrow from the banks, and the banks at that time are all Jews, because the Christians are not allowed to lend money to take interest, because Christians are the new Israel, and the Jews are the rejected Israel, so they can't take money. So that's why there's this prejudice against Jews. Part of it is they are the money lenders, and but on the other hand, the kings need way to take money to do wars and do things. U.S. government also need some of that. So I think bond has a certain good value in there. And for people who buy bonds, let's say China, who buy the American bonds, it's their way of depositing their money in somewhere that is safe, because they trust in the U.S. government's credit. Okay, and there's no better place. Okay, so for the Chinese people think that they own U.S. Not really. It's just this is their bank. Okay, and for the U.S. people, in the sense that other people still trust our credit. So in that sense, there's a good side of it. Okay, and for the people who are investing. Okay, you have a portfolio. Some of your things need to be put in stock market, more aggressive thing,
or locked in, long term versus short term.
Yeah, some need to go to bonds because it's low interest but it's safe. Okay, because credit, the stock market
country goes bankrupt, the first thing will go is stock values.
Right,
then,
stock goes
then bonds.
Right,
because they're the most protected.
Bonds is more protected because it's about governments. Faith, and credibility. So in that sense, there are good and bad things. The problem is not the existence of bonds or governmental debt. The problem is what's the percentage. Okay, when it is as great as our GDP, then that is a problem.
Liquidity,
The liquidity become a real problem. And that is where you need to take control and don't let it grow exponentially as it does now. In the this current presidency, we have doubled our national debt.
Right. Okay. Well, the war is killing us.
No, actually, it's not war. That's a myth again.
Well, no, we spend a lot of money. We spend like $6 billion a day.
That's true. But on the other hand, the government's major role, the federal government role, role, its duty is to do security. War is one of its security. And okay, so the federal government, by the Constitution, is supposed to only have two enumerated rights. The sovereignty belongs to the state. The federal government only have the enumerated rights, which are given to them by the states, shared. And those two rights are national security and interstate commerce.
Right.
And the federal government has expanded that into not only inter but intra-state, and it's overall. And not only, the national security, which it doesn't care now about the border things, and so the federal government doesn't do what it's supposed to do. What it did is it took over the responsibility that is supposed for the church. That means the welfare and education. Those are supposed to be the church's duty. The government took over, and now it's controlling every part, and now it's healthcare also.
Yeah, but most common people don't buy that.
And so most
too complex
for them to
understand.
It makes sense, though. I mean, I've even said that before, that I think that mandatory drug testing and proof of search for employment needs to be taken from anybody who's accepting welfare benefits. I think it's only fair. If you're going to live off of those benefits, you should at least either A, have a medical reason why you need them, or B, show proof that you're...
You see, you have this common sense, and those things were already built in the welfare bill, from a reform bill, which was signed by Bill Clinton. It was promoted by
it's been proposed a couple times, but they won't.
No. The Gingrich Congress passed it. Bill Clinton signed it into law. That was one of the good things he did.
That was one of the great reforms that he did.
But the current president has reverted not through the Congress. He reverted it through the pen of a president. It's called the executive order. Okay, so during his presidency, he ordered that the whatever government agency doing that giving the food stamp and so on. What is that?
It's called Title 10. Who runs it? I don't have that.
Okay, whatever. Yeah, he's ordered them to relax the standard, so you don't have to work, and so on. So right now, during this presidency, the people who get on food stamp and who take welfare have increased, I think, 100%. Okay, and the reason they do that is political, because generally speaking, people who get on the receiving side of government money, they will vote for people who will continue to give that money. Okay. That is buying vote. That is supposed to be illegal, but people do that anyway. And the reason they do that is because this federal government took that role, which wasn't given to it by the Constitution. Okay, it is enumerated, just those few, but now it's taking over everything. So that's why the federal government became the central government, almost like China now. Okay,
it has. But the real issue is, what is the other side of the issue? There are consequences to every action.
Right. Yeah.
Laws of physics talk about that. And are there other consequences? And my conversation was, I sent a letter to the president of Standard & Poor's, and I asked him, why is he saying this and our rating is still AA? Are we that still liquid, and are we really able to maintain our asset level?
Right.
But when the oil embargo, that reduced the value of our assets in oil reserves, and so we're gradually eroding our country's ability to sustain itself.
Yeah, and that's kind of, that was one thing I wanted to ask you, as an accountant and as someone who works with numbers, as you said, is it even feasible to get out of this debt? Because we hear, politicians say, well, we're going to cut here, we're going to cut there, but again, like I said, we do have this huge welfare system. We do have
most of the money spent are for domestic, rather than international.
We also have a major war that's been going on for 15 years.
Yeah, but on the other hand, the wars is the duty of the government. The welfare is not.
No longer.
It's on foreign soil, though.
Yeah,
but that is considerable. That's the international affair issue. That's the government. The president's discretion.
It's not really war anymore. It's an occupation. Essentially, we've been occupying Iraq for at least 10 years. War was, the first year.
Oh, we already pulled out.
Yeah.
That's no more.
They said that, and then we just found out.
And by pulling out,
I know, but we just found out 2 weeks ago that there was a hidden Air Force base that we didn't even know about with 5,000 troops stationed there. So to say that we've pulled out, we haven't exactly pulled out.
So again, this is discussion of debates. We hear opposite sides, right?
Right. Yeah.
So the question really is, can we have a full debate in an hour about this? Probably not.
Right.
But do let me finish the point. The point is I did contact and I got a call after I sent the letter from the Office of Standard & Poor's.
Mm-hmm.
And they were quick to point out they had just released an updated report on the U.S. credit. And they only release them every like 6 or 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so my theory is that when that credit report comes out next time, we're probably going to go down another notch.
Really?
Now that is a demigod. That's a theoretical statement. But if the principles of financial accounting are in place, you're asking for my experience.
If they play by the rules.
If you play by the rules.
That's what should happen.
The question is can they not play by the rules? Because they took away the U.S. currency as a medium of exchange now, and our credit rating has been downgraded once. We continue to amass debt at an unprecedented rate. What's that mean?
Well, I think if I would...
So we pay higher interest,
yeah,
and then you run out of money faster.
Right.
Yeah.
So how does that work on the political level as far as them raising that debt ceiling? How does...
I worked for a company in 2000, just after the 9/11 attacks, of 2001. And the company was a third-generation owned business and was about to go bankrupt. So that's where I first got started on my idea for the book, because the Bible has an answer. And yes, it's not impossible, but there are consequences to the extreme position. I took that company from $1.5 million in debt to break even in 4 years. Okay, and that's a third-generation owned business, which statistically only survived 15% of the time. So you're talking about an anomaly about, is it possible? But I did it using the principles that are found in the Bible. And one of them is avoid debt at all costs.
Right.
So is our nation in trouble? Yes, it is. Is it impossible to change it around? It depends on the American people.
Right, and that's the odd thing. It seems like people are just so disconnected from really, like I said, wanting to take part in that process.
Yeah, they don't want it. They don't want it because they don't want to make the wrong decision themselves. Right. People have a natural fear about two things. One is speaking up in public.
That's the second most fear. First one is death. The second is public speaking.
Wow.
Most feared thing in American life. You can check it out. So people are afraid to stand out.
Oh, nice.
People are afraid to stand up, but for the people who do stand out, okay, a lot of them are for self-interest. And for those who are not for self-interest, they have a general ideal. They usually have some baggage, and they're not perfect. And then other people would dig out that baggage, either destroy them or don't tell and control them.
Right. And I think the dangerous thing is that we see all this anger built up, and it's the media just fuels it daily.
Well, they like the ratings.
Well, I know the ratings are great, but what you're doing to the country as a whole is terrible.
Well, that's where we're talking about we need kind of a sense of collective responsibility. That's where something you are object, and I think there's a reason for the things that they do. The Republican Party wanted Trump to tone down his rhetoric. Well, that is for the collective interest of the party. Okay, so if Trump is really for the party, he should think about this and consider it. And for him, being extravagant actually attracts people, and that's given. Okay, and we understand. But on the other hand, being extravagant in rhetoric can hurt the party, because he may get nominations and the party may lose because you alienate too many people. So there is a point of asking him to tone down. But I'm not saying that necessarily asking the wrong for the right reason, though, because I'm having a problem with these abstinence ideas too. But asking Trump to tone down is not limiting free speech. It is just asking him to consider the collective interest.
Right. Well, asking him that, but stopping him from actually doing the speech, the people that actually stood out there and rallied to stop him from doing that speech,
well,
that in itself is dangerous to the ideal.
And those people are not from the Republican Party. Those are from the Sanders people.
But
they're the extreme left.
But it shows the lack of informed public in the willingness to do something like that, because they don't fully understand the consequences of it.
I don't think it's not they don't care understanding or not. The extreme left, they just want it their way or no way.
Well, both ways. Both sides do essentially the same thing.
There's a video on YouTube. I just saw that. There's a guy who goes out and see which side is more violent. He says for Sanders and for Trump. And the Sanders people really hated him, hit him, and really tried to beat on him. And the Trump people would say, "User Sanders, okay, they are actually polite. They disagree, they're polite." So who is more violent? Well, the rhetoric is that Trump's people are violent, but in reality, the Sanders people are really violent.
It's not the party that's violent. It's those people.
That's right. It's not the candidate, really. It's the people that are supporting these candidates. I'm not so afraid of Trump. I'm afraid of the people who support Trump. Okay? Because Trump, at best, at worst, he's half Mussolini. He's not Hitler. Okay? He's more comical. He's at best, or at worst, he's half Mussolini. It's a little, he wants authoritarian. There has been an leftist dictatorship. I'm going to have a rightist dictatorship through executive order. I'm going to do things even though the Congress doesn't agree with me. The people who support him like authoritarianism, but that's why they support him. But he may not become any of those things, okay, Hitler or Mussolini. But the people who are supporting him are the people who really want authoritarianism, and they will do everything they want. And the other side, Sanders' side, is much more. They are half Stalin. Okay, Sanders half Stalin. I want you to make an image, if possible. Right now, our option is really limited. We have Sanders, who is half Stalin. Can you make a picture? Half Sanders, half Stalin. And we have Clinton, who is half Al Capone. Okay, Clinton is basically mafia. It's a self-serving people using the government, and they will kill people. They have send people to jail before through the
My main thing is when one of them gets in office, how are they really going to act? Because we know that they're characters on that stage. We know that every president that runs for office says this, says that, acts this way when he's running for president. And as soon as he gets in office, it's a completely different person. Even people that have talked to Donald Trump, they say, well, he's saying all this crazy stuff when we talk to him.
Well, they usually moderate down, but they don't totally change it.
And I'll give you a couple of recent examples. I'm from the state of Illinois and moved here 4 years ago. And we recently put 2 governors in jail. One was because he said, I had all the right words, but he ran a motor vehicle program that was selling licenses to illegal immigrants, and it resulted in a crash that killed the 7 kids of a pastor's story, right? And that's how he was making his money on the side. And then the second governor, Mr. Blagojevich, Planet Blago, was trying to sell a Senate seat occupied by the former senator. So the question is what is the character of the person that you're electing? Because even people can be duped. And in Chicago, it all came into fold with me one day when I was trying to hang my own shingle out, and I actually talked to a construction manager about what was wrong with the finances, and he said, I just don't have money. And I finally got a chance to sit him down and figure out what was going on. Well, he was kiting checks. He put the decimal in the wrong place, and he'd forget to put it in the mail, and why are you doing these things? And he says this, he says, you're not dead until your tongue hangs out. And people will go to infinite measures to put on a show just to get people's money. And that's why the Bible says, money
is the source of all evil. Love of money is the source of all evil.
So herein is a Christian principle of somebody who does business for a living, and what is his true motivation?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. I mean, even as I've been in business for years, and the money's great and everything, but I don't do my business for the money. I do my business because I like what I do.
You have a passion for it.
Yeah, I just enjoy it, and I always have. Now, just to get kind of back on the topic of politics, I kind of wanted to bring up this idea that Trump keeps talking about, or well, they keep talking about Trump on the third party. We know that some governments in the world right now have three parties. As you know, from coming out of that and understanding that way better than I do, how do you see a third party working, and or do you? Is it even possible with our governmental structure?
Well, Mr. Ron Paul was the last person to try it in the United States,
Mhm.
and he ended up splitting the ticket.
Oh, you mean Ross Perot?
Ross Perot,
Ross
I'm
Perot,
sorry, thank
yeah.
you for the correction.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it wasn't Ron Paul. But Ross Perot really kind of, yes, you can do it, but the question is what is, can it be pulled off? Nothing is impossible. But in this day and age, I have to look at the environment, and the environment says it would not be healthy for the Republican Party. In fact, it would be more divisive than that. Why do I say that? It's because in the rules of debate, you can have all views held in a division, but when you're in the middle of a discussion and somebody pulls out and I'm starting my own church, it tears down the organization, in my experience, rather than builds it up.
I got you. No one wants to be on a sinking ship, essentially.
And I think it's partly is from the setup of American voting system. Okay, the American system is built up. It's a federal system. It's built up by states, and each state makes its own rule of election and so on. And a lot of states are winner take all. And actually, in the final vote, it is winner take all. Almost all of them, except Missouri, maybe. That's a portion. So they're always 50%. Nobody will go that state. So for the winner take all state, people, the number one place will take all of the votes. And the idea is to try to give the winner a sense of that he really have the how would say the ordination by the people. Okay, so if the winner wins by a landslide, okay, and lots of states, and actually in each state he may just be 51, 52%, but he wins 49 states, and then we'll see that he has the will of the people. Okay, Ronald Reagan won 49 states, and then he was pretty good in doing what he wants to do, because it seems that he has the will of the people. Okay, even though the Congress is the other party, but they worked out
It's
things.
a check and balance system.
They worked out. So, but that's why in Reagan's time the debt went up. That's because the Democrats at first agreed, saying you do what you want to do, and but they also want you need to let us expand our social program. So that's why Reagan defeated the Soviet Union by doing the strategic defense project and raising up the military spending. But he also, during his time, our GDP has grown greatly because of his loosening up the regulations. A lot of companies were built up. So 80s was a big time of capitalism. Okay, our GDP grew exponentially actually at that time. Our income actually grew, the government income grew a lot. They reduced tax rate, but has greater tax revenue. So people often confuse this thing, reduce tax. That what? No, reduced tax rate actually increases tax revenue.
Right, and that's the same thing that happens on local economies.
Now, how exactly does that work? Because, that is kind of a common misconception. Just to explain that a little
bit. And this mainly, the most people that see this are property owners. When you buy a piece of property, it's not just the mortgage. There's usually taxes on that property, and those taxes help fund your local governments, schools, and county governments on a low level. And Texas has been debating this recently, if you listen to the news, that they think property taxes are way out of line. In fact, Texas is second only to the state of New York in terms of total taxes on given people. And that's why there was a big push by the Democratic Party to turn Texas blue. if you read, because their free spending is any other state, really, and second to Texas, and that's not me. That's a public record.
But Texas is a Republican state, but the Republicans in the Texas legislature are really, moderate. They're not really
they're moderate,
conservative. So, they spend a lot.
Let's focus on your thing. How does that work? So the local economy and government rule by collecting taxes, and so their ability to expand or contract. If you're conservative, you want smaller government, right? But what has been happening to the taxes is that as demand for housing increases because there's more spending and more money available, house prices rise, and your taxes are based on a rate, like you said, of your price of the fair market value of your house or property. So if your house is $100,000 and the tax rate is 3%, then how much do you pay? You pay $3,000, right?
Now it's $200,000. Suddenly you pay $6,000. So
you can quickly see how people get taxed out of living, and this is what happened in 2006. And in fact, it started before Reagan. I wanted to correct you. Was Reagan's economic revival real, or was it? How can I say? Imaginary or not.
Well,
part of it was because of the Economic Reform Act called Community Reinvestment Act passed in Carter's administration, and that took the lid off of the bank's ability to sell mortgages at based on income, to where it got reduced from you got to have 20% down to now only 3% down. So
actually, it's not to take the lid off. It's actually forcing them. You must give so much to the low-income people with low down payment, and that increases the risk for the bank. However, that is politically correct, and that Community Development Act, Reinvestment Act, was the reason of the financial crisis that happened at the end of the Bush Jr.'s years.
Right, and then it resurfaced again, and that act still has not been repealed.
It hasn't been repealed yet.
So what's that tell you? If we're running on fumes on our federal government and the personal debt ratio of the individual citizen outside of taxes is at the limit. So that means
so basically the idea is tax rate is just a number. It doesn't really mean much. The tax revenue is what the government actually takes in.
Right.
Okay. When your tax rate is too high, people will tend to do less, because every time you do things, you pay tax. When people do less economic activities, there are less GDP created. Okay. And therefore, since the tax rate has to multiply by the product, okay, by the GDP. Okay, and that's where the government, if you raise tax rate but GDP shrinks, the product is actually smaller. Okay, when they lower the tax rate, people do more activities, since economic activities tend to grow exponentially. Okay, I do one thing more, but I need cooperation from two people, and both of you start to do more, and each of you will need two people, so it's exponential. So when the tax rate reduces a little bit, the economic activity tends to grow exponentially much more than that rate. So when you multiply it, the revenue actually increases for the government. That's why the demagogues always say, oh, they want to reduce the tax. No, then we will have no money for this and that. That's not just the opposite of the truth. Okay, reduce the tax rate actually increases tax revenues for the government. They can have more money to do things. Okay, right. It just doesn't sound right for certain people. They feel like, okay, we must kind of punish those who got rich by raising tax rates.
Yeah, that's another thing that frustrates me, is that class warfare that we're kind of living in. This idea, this one thing that really frustrates me about Bernie Sanders, when he talks about, the 1%, not 90% of the GDP should be in the 1%. He says the same thing every time he's on stage. I crack up when I'm at home watching the debates. Here we go again.
It's a broken record.
But there are people who like to listen to that, because their heart is filled with hatred of people who are better. And guess what? The Bible has 10 commandments. The last one, it says, do not covet those who have more than you.
The U.S. Census Bureau Bureau actually keeps statistics on the largest, what America was known as having the largest middle class. It wasn't that it didn't have the 1%ers, but the ratio of middle economic portion versus that.
Was it what Romney said, the haves and the soon to haves?
Yeah, and soon to have. Well, the U.S. government since the time of Henry Ford, not Model T, have made the workers live a decent life. Okay, so from the 1930s and the roaring 20s, from then on, the U.S. middle class grew. Okay, so U.S. basically has a small top and small bottom. Okay, and it has mostly middle class. That was the norm for most of the 20th century. But from the time, basically, I think in the Clinton years, okay, there was a growth of the poor. Okay, and maybe in the Carter years, earlier, I think, there was a growth of the poor. A lot more people are getting on welfare. Clinton actually have curbed it, but now Obama has expanded it. But the shape of the, what do you call them, the football shape now is gradually becoming an hourglass shape. Okay, so the middle class is being squeezed by the rich and the poor. So the rich now actually are not supporting the. Most of the rich are not supporting the Republican Party as a myth. Most of the rich are the Wall Street people. They support the Democratic Party. Why? Because the Democratic Party will want government to participate in economy. Right. And when they participate, those who have connections will get rich very quick. That's called crony capitalism. Okay, so once government participates in economy, then you're gonna have corruptions naturally because you have connection, you get rich quick. Okay, and the super rich will they know they're not popular. They will get the votes by giving some kind of vote dough from the government to the poor. And the poor, even though their value and even their heart don't like the super rich, but they will unite with super rich together to squeeze the middle class. So that's what happens. The Democratic Party in the last half a century, etc., is basically the super rich uniting with the super poor. Together, they are squeezing the middle class. Right. And gradually, there are very few people who are working. Okay.
We'll see, and that's what I wanted to mention.
And then who are going to support those poor? I'm sympathetic to them. But if you keep them on that place, in that poor place, and they have to stay poor to get the things, there's a limit how much you can work. Even though a lot of people on disability, they can work, but they have to work less than a certain number in order to keep on receiving. But if that's the case, then the economic activity will not grow. People will just stay.
Well, I think a large problem also is that we don't have the quality of jobs that we used to have.
He's, to Bernie's point, he's saying, well, you get free education, so you'll be able to educate yourself for the right jobs, right?
Which is great. I mean, one concept, maybe like a 2-year trade school would be great if you can.
But you don't need but
we already have financial aid and things like that in place to help people go. Like right now, I just went 2 semesters to Cisco. I didn't pay for anything. The government paid for it.
Wow.
So to say that you can't go to school, that the government...
Where was the government when I go to school?
I'm just saying, we already have this in place if you use the system, but the majority of people don't use the system. They just don't want to be a part of it. That, or they're stuck in that poor, degraded house, and they grow up like that, and they only they're raised in that environment, and they, 9 times out of 10... continue that cycle. And
I think overall you go back to I have to go back to the loss of the Christian worldview, and then with that the Christian ethics. Okay, in man and woman family. Okay, when man and woman not faithful to each other, family break. Okay, when family break, the children suffer. Children do not get educated. Why? They can't study. They are nervous. Children in broken family, they're always nervous. They're always living in fear. They can't concentrate in study. They can't become good students. Okay, the normal family, 2 parents family, children are better. Why? Because children have peace. Okay,
Right.
so you want to give free education, but if the person has already psychological problem because of the family issue, they can't study. Okay, no matter how free you give it to them, they can't study. Okay, so again, it goes back to this country was founded as a Christian country. It has the church providing the truth, and then with that, it provided a stable society.
Well, it wasn't a Christian country, though. It was.
But it was
Christian morals.
No, Christian
But
country.
the country itself.
David
there's
Martin
always
did a
been that.
great exposition on
That is a myth. Okay, saying
Yeah.
it was not a Christian country. It was.
No, I'm not saying that
okay?
it wasn't like a Christian country. I mean, yes, the founders, foundationally it was Christian, but we do still have that separation there between
The
our
separation
religious beliefs and
was not from religion, but of religion.
The separation of church and state was not in Constitution. It was in a letter from Jefferson
Right, yeah.
to a Baptist pastor, guaranteeing that the government will not put its hand into the church.
Right.
That's the separation. The separation is one direction of separation. Separation the government from the church.
Right.
It never says separate the church from the government.
Yes,
the
but
Christians
like I
do
said
participate
before,
in the government.
If you limit the government to just being Christian, then you exclude the freedom of religion
No,
that are in the country.
we're not
Then
doing.
You're imposing
No.
Christian beliefs on
No,
people that don't attest to
Christian
that.
country doesn't mean only Christians can participate in government.
No, I
It's
know, I
not
know.
what it means.
No, I know
It means that most of the people in this country believe in a Christian worldview. They live on Christian ethics. Actually, the states in the beginning, all of the states had state religions. Okay?
Right.
You have to be a Christian, a church
When you
member,
run for elected office, you
And a
have
state
to
owner.
acknowledge.
a state owner,
Christ.
in order to
but
run for
like,
office.
Can you not do that? Like, if you were to join for some reason, and I hate when people do that. It's kind of frustrating to me. Like if you were to pray and I were to go, oh, I'm gonna listen to this.
Yeah.
Well, you've been polite,
It
tolerant.
seems so
That's
rude
good.
to me. Like, even whenever like people take an oath of office, there's been some people. Oh, I won't say I pledge allegiance because under God.
You don't want to offend anybody.
It's
Right.
when we start getting to that level of nitpickiness, it kind of scares me as far as the way people are, because right now, as far as our public goes, most people are just day to day. They're making maybe $8-9 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
They're struggling. Maybe their daughter got pregnant. It's just life isn't good for the majority of people in the United States. I mean, we live comfortable compared to the rest of the world. Our rent's somewhat cheap. We can sustain ourselves on $9 an hour. Barely.
Barely.
But
And that's
it
a big
can. And I
debate.
think that level of comfort stops people from having that want to motivate to do better.
Mhm.
Because if you can go work at McDonald's and make $10 an hour and still pay your apartment and go out and watch
Yeah,
You
see,
get drunk, but
it's
you
never
can't buy property
meant-
or you
Yeah.
can't-
Those minimum wage jobs,
But you
they were never meant for people to own it permanently.
And that's what I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
The quality of jobs has decreased.
The quality of jobs decrease because of several reasons. First of all, our laws have become so hostile to industries. Okay, our let's say we used to allow children to work, and then out of humanitarianism, we say no children can work at a certain age. Well, then how do they learn how to work? Right? And sometimes, if the family has trouble, father died, the elder son usually will say, "I'll work. I'll support my mother." Okay, then he became a really good man. He learned skill early. He became a good, successful life.
Yeah, actually, Robert
yeah.
Briley here in town, he came from a very poor family. He took care of his brothers and sisters, and now he's a millionaire. And
Yeah, I mean,
also
right now that way
I'm
is
sure
not
it's
open,
also-
because if he's done that, his employer would be arrested and put in jail. Okay, so our labor law, in the name of humanitarianism, has done some evil. Okay, in preventing jobs, and the other side is our environmental law. Okay, we have become so stringent that we want clean air, clean water, so much so that no industry can
what we see
survive
the
here.
aftermath of not having those regulations.
I know there is a balance of there, but we have swung too much. Okay,
Oh, yeah,
to
I
the
agree.
direction. Okay, right now American air and water is the cleanest Okay, they among all countries. Okay, and I know when I'm living in China how polluted it is, but now I can run, without having without coughing.
In China?
In China, I couldn't. Yeah, I was doing that when I was young. Then it became polluted, and I came over here. But here, I can do it. In Abilene, I can do it better than Dallas.
Well, you also have to think that when we moved those factories, we ramped up our agricultural production. I mean, I just looked up the stat just to make sure I was right, but it's 63% or 51% of the U.S. total acreage is used for agriculture. So when we have that much allocated space to one industry, and we've pushed all of our factory work out, it's very disappointing when you talk about it, because it's like, will those companies ever come back? Will there ever be an incentive for those companies?
Also, there are also other labor laws. Okay, the labor laws, when we are allowed union to have too much power. Okay, I'm not saying union have no place, but I'm saying union had too much power, and it basically destroyed the industry. Okay, the steel industry, many of those industries, they are not profitable to work here, so they have to move their productions to other countries. And then other countries, like automakers like Toyota, they move in. Since they don't have unions, they can sell things cheaper. Okay, now, Toyota is in they build it in Alabama, and
yeah, I think there's a plant here in Texas too,
and then one in Texas too. Yeah, so they don't have unions, and therefore their cars can sell cheaper, and they can put more R&D and developing. Therefore, hey, I like to buy Toyota now, and actually I'm kind of okay with this. And even this Japanese brand is made in America. I'm supporting American people, So I'm now buying American by buying Toyota.
Now, just to I want to get back on the politics thing, because we have you here and you're very informed on that. I wanted to just touch base with you and see what you thought about what happened in Arizona with the voter blocking, where they basically removed a lot of voting sites and limited it to like 5 in the entire city, and people from all over were having to cram in these lines waiting for 5 hours to vote. A lot of them old, had to go home, they weren't able to vote. Mm-hmm. How does that affect our political system when we have things like that happening? And is there something that we as voting public can do to impede that from happening, like here in Texas or in other states?
Yeah. The example of where voters, after they were treated unfairly, rebelled and voted up was in Iowa, where they had the Supreme Court rule on, I think it was something to do with marriage. And the voters voted the Supreme Court members out of office. And so in California, they have something similar where they recall voters, things like that. I don't know what the situation in Arizona is, but my gut is that has. And in the state of Florida, another thing came up where the voters rebelled, didn't like how the party was run, and they took over the party. One thing, the consequence that happened is the people that came into office out of the state party in Florida, when the Tea Party people took over that, the political party that was in place doled out all the organization funds before the next administration could take care of that. What's that tell you about self-interest? And
right.
Again, Christianity talks about not self-interest, but the leader-servant. And leader-servant is what makes Christendom such an appealing, why Christians are so compassionate about electing Christian leaders. Mm-hmm. Because that element of servant leadership would not allow that to happen, because you're typically looking at what are you really debating. There is the plan of what to do with the funds versus the purpose, and then the principles. All those three things are what can make a good debate versus a one-sided debate. Mm-hmm. And so when when there's self-preservation, that's not a good attitude to have.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think you addressed his question though, because I don't know if you're aware of this.
Saying that
there
there
was
ways to
there are ways to
But
do
it's
it.
after
Yes.
the fact. Yes,
Yeah.
you can't prevent those. You can
Right.
prevent those, but even after they occur, you can right the ship. It's just up to the voters if they want to do it. But
Yeah.
some people, because of the labor laws right now and people having to work extra jobs just to make it, it does make that effort to overcome evil with good much more difficult.
Right.
Well, the issue I think you were talking about is that in one area in Arizona, they have their election committee based on the previous election's result.
Mhm.
They believe that more people are going to send in mailing votes through mail rather than being personally present. So with that trend, estimated the trend, they decided to cut off 70% of the voting places. And
Is that what your concern
yeah,
was?
that's what he's talking.
Okay.
He's concerned that may be a trend, trying to shrink the people's ability to vote so some people cannot vote.
Personally,
I don't think that is.
Well, I mean, we've seen it happen in a couple of states here recently, in the
Yeah.
last election and in this one, where that's happened. So,
Whatever happened, I don't think it was intentional. It was a mistake. That's based on a previous election's trend. But this election has turned out different. A lot of Trump voters are first-time voters.
voters
Yeah.
turnout is
Yeah,
up
vote turnout is
tremendously.
tremendously up, maybe 50% up. So that's why so many people come out and they didn't expect it. Okay, and so I think the shrinking of the voting size was a mistake, but it was a reasonable mistake based on the estimate of the previous one, and it was wrong, well, because this election is different. Okay, so I don't think it was a trend. I don't think it was intentional. I don't think that anybody wanted to limit other people's right to vote. It was just a mistake that caused some trouble, and they will correct it definitely.
Right, and the process doesn't stop there. I mean, obviously, if people couldn't vote, they can't participate in the process.
Right.
But every state has different rules. In Texas, even though you have to vote in order to get involved in the convention. Okay, so there are judges that come and look at those things, and they can make a judgment as to whether this was fair or not, and then they have to redo the election. I've even heard where if there was a big disenfranchisement, that you just say, okay, we're doing it over. I know it because I'm doing it with my homeowners association. We had a vote, and the thing was, we found out that of the people that voted, there was a certain number of them that still owed association dues. And the bylaws are very strict and say, if you owe money, your vote doesn't count.
Gotcha.
And we are not saying, no, that switches the vote. It was a tie vote, by the way, which means the motion failed if you study parliamentary rules.
Right.
You always have to have a majority. If you don't have a majority vote, even though it's the same amount, it still fails.
Oh, well, did you mention to me that you actually abstained so that you let it tie? So you don't let you are
There's a delete button over here.
You held the golden ticket, huh?
I held the golden ticket, but this is where servant leadership doesn't put self-interest when you're a leader.
You didn't want to impose your will over the majority,
even though I could have. Now, Congress has the same thing. If there's a tie in the Senate, the vice president can go in and cast a vote, and that's fine. Sometimes that does make a difference.
Yeah, and usually it's with it bitterness.
Right.
So result in the time, but then we found out afterwards, hey, this wasn't a fair vote because these people's vote shouldn't have counted. And so now we're redoing the vote. So as you get older in your career, you'll have opportunities to lead. You will find out that leadership takes character. And it is that character, where does it come from, that often makes the difference between a generation that loses its power and influence and one that continues to regenerate itself. And the question is what country is this United States at this point?
Yeah. And just to get an idea of how, I kind of want to just explain to people how the voting structure works on the state legislative side. because I think I know that's a huge part of voting that just nobody takes part in. Is that state senate spot, those
I'm
congressional
hoping
spots.
this next year, one of my goals is to actually go down to the state senate in Houston, and when they have hearings, to actually speak on part of a bill. Now, and also one of the things that the conventions does is you get to raise issues that speak to a party's platform. What is it for? So I wrote a new resolution that passed on the county level that is now going to the state to be considered as part of the party platform or resolutions. Would you like to know what that is?
Absolutely.
Okay, I wrote two of them. One is to encourage the development of a voter app. I mean, they have software that does eye recognition. Why do you need soft? We could save thousands of dollars if we could just perfect recognition software to recognize, pulse and eye movement and the thumbprint, and you don't have to go to a voting booth.
Right.
So why not use technology to do this? Now, we know that there's identity theft and all these other things, but we should at least consider it, and consider it for the convention. Now, 2 years ago, I made that when you have 9,000 delegates in the same room, why not text your yes or no?
Oh, yeah.
When I went there 2 years ago, it was a big shouting match. I mean, there were people, it just chaos. But we are not using technology, so that was one.
That's nice, yeah. Okay.
Second one had to do with this debt problem that we have on a local level as well as state and federal. And I said, because the states are now, and cities are now taking up all the credit with bureaus, because their credit is perfect because they can all raise taxes, right? I said, we have to start incorporating standards for government entities to include unfunded mandates. Okay, so when the federal government says, you now have to cover this, this, and this, or you have pension costs that have this, this, and this, the financial statement has to consider, in order to be approved for debt, that you have to include all those pension liabilities, which are astronomical, and puts governments on the same playing field as businesses. Right now, governments are winning hands down because they can always tax the wazoo.
Right.
And that was my second resolution.
Gotcha. Now, you're kind of talking about the debt, if you will, on a local level. I know here in Abilene, they were trying to pass some more funding for the road development here because our roads are terrible. On our own local level, as far as like a city councilman chair or a precinct judge, what do those jobs or positions do as far as statewide? So how does the city council interact with the mayor? How does the mayor interact with the state? How does that hierarchy function?
It's not a well-publicized relationship. They really are meant to be independent of each other, but because there are mandates, like I say, between the government entities, the state can provide funding for certain road improvements. I mean, obviously the city has roads that are connected to state and federal roads, right? So they all kind of work together. And it tends to be, again, if you don't have people of character in those offices, the tendency is for the use of those funds to be abused. So it's not a question of, well, how do they all interplay? It's not that they do, but do you trust the people that are using those funds? And one thing I pointed out at city, I've actually been to a city council meeting and spoke. Again, the most recent fear, and that's why I use, why? Because I understand parliamentary procedures. And you know when you can get up and speak. Now, the thing that I've impressed is that a city is only as good as the people that live there.
That's right.
Okay.
The leaders are only as good as the people because we elect them.
Right. And there's been, I actually was a treasurer for one of the members of city council. I don't know if you need that.
Nice.
And we unseated a two-term incumbent. Bruce Kreitler, do you know him?
I don't know him.
Okay.
Yeah, he's one who wrote the book called the Offermann.
Okay.
Okay.
See, I knew the other guy, Statler. I think he was the commissioner, or he was running for commissioner.
Yeah, Mr. Statler is a commissioner. I know him. I
Yeah, I
talked
worked
to
with
him
his
several.
wife
Okay.
years ago, but
Sherry? Okay, yes.
yeah, over
Okay.
at Christian Homes.
Okay, good.
But yeah, really good people. So I know Abilene has some very awesome guys that are trying to really do something with our city. I mean, I know ACU's going D1, so we're building that stadium. It's going to be huge for our visitors.
There's a lot of economic activity.
Yeah,
And
I know
home
real
prices
estate's-
are going up.
Yeah.
And the thing is are we going to have another case where we go off the cliff by pushing income homes and the taxes on those homes up too fast, and so end up having a big what do you call it, meltdown
Right.
for the things here. And so if we suddenly lose the Dulles Air Force Base or something like that because taxes are too high here, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Getting back to your question, you know, how does that all work? As an accountant for private corporations, my sole purpose is to make sure that people get the right information to make decisions. And what is not going on here that I wish could improve, and I have made suggestions, is how to get the people that vote for these proposals to hold them accountable. And that's where I have said over and over again, without a report, you cannot support. And if you don't know what the condition of the roads improvements are, how do you know your tax dollars being used fairly?
Right. Yeah.
Isn't that what you told me, that they have passed a bond deal, but they forgot to include the drains, the water drain?
That was
Yeah,
only
they
part
didn't
of the
even have
problem.
a full estimate when they went to the city council. They
Yeah.
asked the guy, you know, how much are we going to need? And he's like,
Right.
well, right now we're spending about $340 per square mile or per square mile of road, I think. And he's like, we need to be spending somewhere around 1,000. So he doesn't even have an
Isn't
accurate
that
number.
kind of irresponsible in
Absolutely.
letting the
Seems like it.
voters pass something, and then they say, okay, it's passed, but we underestimated, and now let's do a supplement.
Right, but there's still been no assessment of where our road conditions are.
Right.
So that's an indication of poor management, and that somebody needs to roll some heads.
And what city seat would that be that would take care of that? Would it be like I'm guessing there's a road.
It's the responsibility of all council members
Okay.
to understand what's going on. But again, we have all governments struggle with how do you do it. The members on the city council work for $1 a year. So I would be in favor of changing that to paying the people on the city council so that they can take the time
Oh, right.
to do that. Now it's a double-edged sword, because now, you're increasing government, but very few people have the ability to hold people accountable. And there's no financial expert that I know of on the current city council. They're all business leaders,
Yeah.
and they have a good business sense, but they don't know what accountability is, which goes back to why I'm writing the book.
I got you. And what exactly is the book going to be? What's it going to entail?
It details the 5 principles of stewardship, which is a lost principle of money management. But if you understand the gospel, you will understand these, because they just have 5 words to them.
Right now.
What are they?
Well, that would
Are you going to
be,
give it? Are you
I
wanna
can't
wait
give it
on
now
that?
because
You have to get the book.
why I don't have money. Doug Offermann.
Well, then you might have money when they publish.
Yeah, you'll have to give us a copy when it comes out. I don't mind reading it.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, that's I think it's just important for people, and I even tell people my age, especially my friends and things like that. I'm like, because I'm constantly waiting for that next election, and I'm like,
Hey,
guys,
check the back
are you
there. Where's my voting
ready to vote?
Yeah.
They don't really care.
Well, what am I voting for? I don't know.
They're waiting for the next version of the
I've forced both
game.
of my
I want
friends
my,
to file their
Halo
registration
games,
and get their
uh-huh.
voter cards. So I make sure that people around me are somewhat informed. Or
Well, they need to get informed. Otherwise, they will vote without knowledge. Will not be helpful for anybody.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why I'm writing letters to a local conservative newspaper called the Buffalo Gap News.
Oh, okay.
I'm a regular contributor there. I didn't write one for this month, but
That's a pleasant.
They have some
newspaper,
oddball stories in there. I will say that.
That's a very pleasant one. Yeah.
mothball? Is that what you said?
Oddball.
Oddball, he said. Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew Way, I used to work with him at Your Way, and he actually advertised in there, so we'd get them all the time, and I'd read through them. Some of them were...
It's funny.
Yeah. Some of it is a venting, and
Yeah.
But such is the freedom of press, and we have that.
Yeah.
It's a great thing about our nation. We have the rights to do those things.
But again, I think, and since we are here, all of us are considered interested in politics. What's facing this country in this election is I think it's a very important one. And what is making me concerned is that our options are now become more and more extreme. We don't have some person who is kind of in the middle can unite.
No glue.
People. No, there's no glue anymore.
But
it's just a polarization. This country is getting more and more. People who are going to left, and they're going extremely left. We have a card-carrying socialist who can win half of the Democrat vote. And we have a demagoguery, a person who can win, a third of the Republican vote.
That's why I worked with Charles Perry, a senator for position for state senate.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Perry is a CPA, and he knows how to bring ideas and concepts down to brass tacks numbers.
Right.
And he's got one of the highest approval ratings of any of the senators in the state of Texas.
Nice.
So when we get more financial astute people in our Congress and legislatures, city councils, I'll feel better about that.
Yeah, and see, that's one thing that I've always said is it's very odd that most of our congressmen are lawyers. I mean, most of them, they're studying.
I can figure out how to bend a rule anytime you want. However you want to make it.
Yeah, it's so odd to me. It's like we need some other people in there.
But one of the biggest scandals was a result of a financial meltdown, and one of them was Bernie Madoff, of course.
Right.
The guy that basically one of the largest banks, and Enron. That's one of the ones I'll talk about in the book. I'll make a few points.
Mm-hmm.
Enron was one of those large utility type vendors, and basically they overstated their books because of a little rule, and again, the rule that misled their board of directors. The rule was you can't sell the stock. It's employee stock-owned options, and they wouldn't allow employees to sell their stock, even though the thing on the public market was really high without certain conditions. And the chief financial officer and the other financial people were in cahoots on what those rules were. And the board didn't have dilly squat. And so out of that situation came a bankruptcy case, one of the largest in U.S. history, and one of the most devastating in people that had pensions in that company, because they lost it all. And why? Because the people that were put as supervisors were rubber stamping anything that was recommended to them.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where was that money going? I mean, was it
This
just
is
never
evaporated.
there? It was never
Evaporated in the stock
Well,
market. It's gone.
there was a couple different ways they did it. One was whenever they had spent money,
Mhm.
they called it a capitalized expense, so they didn't have to expense it all. And so consequently, it looked like they were making money, but really but they would subgrade those expenses to another company, and then it was off their balance sheet. And,
So yeah, they
all the tricks. And then you can go online and find that.
And wasn't it Anderson, one of the accounting companies?
Yeah, the IRS took one of their public accounting, public auditing firms out of business. Too late. They reversed their decision, but too late. The damage was already done because the federal regulators were concerned about all these businesses declaring bankruptcy, and then the taxpayer would have to add that. There's over 12 million bankruptcies filed every year.
Wow.
But as far
all those fall back on the tax dollars.
Really? Okay.
Yes, because they go through federal court, bankruptcy court.
FDIC is insuring it, so when they are bankrupt, everybody together paying for it. And I know that the U.S. banks have played leverage too much. As far as I know, they're playing leverage much more than their assets. It is very dangerous. If something happens, the whole thing collapses, the whole country collapses. Okay.
And that's the fear
that's
that's running through Wall Street right now. Is every time you get a little bit ahead, it falls back.
Yeah, and you know, one thing I attribute that to also our lack of income in the States is that we are now playing ball on a global scale versus just being here like we were in the 40s through, you know,
it's not just you against 80s. Me competing for a job.
Yeah,
we're competing against.
Well, and investors are investing money in foreign companies. You know, we invest money in, you know, all kinds of things, Fujitsu in Japan or Nissan.
Yeah.
Or,
well, I mean, basically, I think there, with so many trouble in this country, I believe there are ways to solve them. Okay, and you just need to get the people involved and vote in the people who are going to practice the principles that are correct, and they're going to do it. They're
no more career politicians in Congress.
Yeah, right. You got to find people who have track records of being consistent in what they say, rather than deal makers. That's why I have a problem with, you know, with Trump, who is a deal maker. He always saying, "I'm going to throw out 3 times what I want, and then I get 1/3." So whatever you hear from him is 3 times more than what he actually would do. And you got to have people who are consistent to say, "This is what I propose, and I will do that. And I will do it, not do it by dictatorial way. I'm doing the constitutional way." And from what the candidates we have, it seems like Cruz is the only one that is possible to do that. Okay, whether he can, that's another thing, right?
Most deal makers do it because it's legal.
Right.
Yeah.
And is that a good way to run a country?
Yeah. You know, so I think that the issues that Trump called the attention are the real issues that people are concerned about.
Yeah, and that's one thing that is scary to even me. Sometimes, I mean, I watch all the debates, so I'm watching it, I'm listening to him, and I'm like, well, you know, he makes some valid points about the economy, or at least to an extent on trade. I think he makes some very valid points on trade, because we do take it a little bit from other countries, and the idea is that we can't necessarily go there and sell things in the same way that they do here. It's not necessarily the same marketplace, I don't think. I don't know, maybe you can have some insight into that as far as...
It's called imbalanced trade. Yes, he has a point on there, but the solution he proposed is not applicable. You cannot solve the problem by raising tariffs. Okay, see, a lot of these
started World War II, World War I.
Yeah, and actually, we cannot do that. We are part of the World Trade Organization. Right. Okay, you can't raise tariffs if you're a member of the organization unless you withdraw from that. Okay, and if you break your treaty, you exit your treaty that you joined, how much credibility does the country have? Okay.
Well, that's why Japan pulled out of the most recent Pacific Rim Agreement too. There was some cautions about.
It's a TPP,
how much are we getting?
Yeah, what do you know about the TPP as far as, do you know anything?
No, I'm not going to, I try to keep up, but...
Yeah, I know, I was actually just checking because I haven't looked in a few months.
The principle is when you start deal making with all the players, you know, there's a risk there of not knowing whether you oversold yourself or not.
TPP basically is trying to have a trade partnership excluding China. Okay.
Really?
Yeah. TPP it's Trans-Pacific whatever partnership. Yeah. That one is a trade partnership without China. Okay. But Japan pulled out because it doesn't want to offend China. Okay, that's the problem. But that's not a big issue. The big issue is our trade problem is a systematic problem. It's not a one issue. You could just raise tariffs, and that will hurt American people by paying more for the product.
Yeah, there's ripple effects.
Yeah, you gotta let these companies pull their works back here. Okay, and the way to do that is through tax, not tariff. Okay, and yeah, you let the companies...
What exactly would be the difference between tax and tariff, just to clarify?
Tariff is to tax the products that you import from other country when you have, you know,
it increases the cost of goods when they cross the border.
So right now what happens is the U.S. has made so much environmental laws and labor laws and so on, and made the companies feel that it's not profitable to produce their stuff here. So what they did is that they moved their plants to, let's say, China, using their cheaper labor. Right now, it's not much cheaper than the U.S. now. Okay, and then polluting their environment, but a lot of jobs are not polluting the environment, like making Apple, products. Okay.
Right. Well, Apple's one of the leading companies as far as environmentally friendly. They try to be.
Yeah, but they use really, really cheap labor in China, and they are using them as machines, and they make 1,000 of them every day, and they earn a very little. But that company, Foxconn, have
Foxconn.
Foxconn. You know how many people they work for them? Hundreds of thousands of people. Okay, but they're mostly production for the Apple products. All the iPads or iPhones are produced in Shenzhen, China. Okay, and why the Apple will do that? Because their labor cheap. Foxconn say, I guarantee you. Also, they have efficiency. So the U.S. companies now don't have efficiency in production because the labor laws and the lower quality of American laborers.
Yeah, the work ethic here is kind of very.
So what happened is that the companies produce in other countries and they sell back. Since those countries, they can't consume these.
Yeah.
Okay? They produce a lot. China produces a lot more than they can consume.
They can't afford it.
Yeah. No, the reason is that in that country, about, I don't know the exact percentage, but very small, top 1% or 5% or something, owns something like 90% of the assets of the country. So it is so imbalanced. That's the inverted pyramid. So the few people, no matter how much money they have, they can't consume that much. And the most people under there, they don't have money to consume. They got better than before. They're happy, but they don't have money to consume the things they produce. So what happens with the things they produce? They sell back to the United States. Okay, but the United States, we don't produce things. Where are our money? We print it. We print it because the world still, especially oil country, they still use our money as the reserve money. Okay, and therefore we produce it a lot, but we don't cause a lot of inflation because it's the worldwide inflation. Okay, so we don't have much consequence. So our government found out, hey, we can do that. Let's keep on printing, keep on raise our debt limit. And since there's no other place to place their country. Since China now has a lot of money, they don't have other place to place it. They have to buy our debt, so we can keep on printing money, we can keep on raising our debt. But this is a house of cards. Okay, it's gonna fall sometime. So right now, what this president has done is to prepare for the crash of America, to prepare for America to be a weak country. Okay, but what Trump has done is says, no, I'm going to make America great again. But that's okay, good slogan, in a good direction. No, I agree with that. But the way he proposes is trade war with China by raising tariffs. That won't work. It's a systematic thing. You have to change a lot of these laws and change the taxes. And taxes about our own companies, not about the products from other countries. Okay, taxes is changing the tax structure, making the companies that they will feel profitable to work here. Okay, rather than elsewhere. Okay, and you let people who invest get their return. Okay, and you let those who produce it here has some advantages than those who produce it elsewhere.
Right.
Okay, and then those jobs will come back. So trade is one issue, but it's not the most important issue. Right. Actually, what the illegal immigrant is the most important issue for the country. Didn't you make a poll?
Well, I took a poll in 2014 state convention in Texas. Again, largest state convention in the world with 9,000 people. I did a short survey on what was the most pressing issue with the state of the nation, and hands down, 90% voted immigration.
Yeah, it is the most important problem because of what? Because what you feel that we don't have good jobs, and part of the good jobs is that the illegal immigration have caused the depression of our labor jobs. Okay, because we have so many illegal immigrants who will work for nothing. Okay, and therefore the a lot of employers are paying nothing.
Or they get paid on top of working for a low income.
Yeah, and they also get aid, so they will work for very little money, which takes away the jobs of, let's say, beginning laborers, like American teenagers who want to find a job of mowing. There's no more mowing jobs these days.
Right.
So illegal immigrants take them over. So, that is something that is influencing American workers. Okay, and by doing these jobs, which is kind of underground, and they're not paying taxes, except maybe. Well, anyway, they're not paying Social Security as far as I know. But anyway, they pay part of tax, like sales tax.
Sales tax,
but
which is why some people are proposing a national sales tax. They want to take that out.
Not that,
and really, it's do you put a Band-Aid on the problem and stop the bleeding, or do you need to cut off the leg? And
and that may be one of the things, but you can as an add-on, but it's not the solution. The solution is that you got to stop the influx, and so therefore, I think Trump saying building a wall is a good idea. Okay, it doesn't take that much money. We can easily do it.
Though,
no, it is. Oh, it is. It is very easy. For America, that's no big deal. Okay.
Well, I'm talking about where the actual geological space it's going to take up, it's going to be almost impossible.
No. There's nothing impossible for America. See, I'm an adopted American citizen. I believe
I'm not
in
saying
the ability
it's going to be
America.
literally impossible.
It
but
is
going to cost a whole.
No,
lot
it's
of money.
not a lot. Comparing with the cost of allowing these flowers flowing in,
a lot of
it's
them
a
are
minimal.
coming in airplanes. They're not coming in.
No, airplanes are minimal. Most people
the
fly
majority
in
of
water.
You guys are talking about theory, and you need to bring it down to a report level.
Right.
And say, Texas has already increased its border patrol. How effective has it? Yeah, if you don't measure it, you're not going to be able to speak.
I know that there are real examples. Tijuana used to have a flow thing. It's free. Now they built a wall in the Democratic Party controlled California. They built a wall in Tijuana, and the flow reduced 90%. Okay, it works, and it doesn't cost that much. It's very easily done, and it's on our side. Okay, we don't build on their side. We're on our side.
Yeah, but we still have to hire people to monitor that gate. We have to have.
That doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Is you got to measure both sides. If you're only measuring the flow valve and you're not measuring the impact on the economy, you're talking.
So it's hard to do that though when you don't have.
But you can.
That's what a leader's job is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why when you did that poll, I think people feel that the real impact on our economy is so large that the cost of building the wall is minimal. In reducing the other thing. Okay. Yeah.
Usually, you get a couple things working together. You string them together, and you make a big impact.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So, how long does it take to build a wall that's 1,800 miles long? Nothing. I agree on that. I'm not sure about the productivity in China, but
it's easily done. I think in Texas, within 1 decade, the whole wall can be built up, and the flow will drop 90%, just as was in Tijuana. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's an idea and concept, but the problem is monitoring all of those things.
Now, then the place you monitor will be much smaller. You see, you just monitor where
80-20 rule.
Yeah.
It's common everywhere. If you just
so
do 80%,
that actually
you will cut your cost in half.
Yeah. So what Trump said did catch the heart of the people who felt the pain.
Yeah,
okay?
Absolutely.
And I think it's a good idea. I think it's not a difficult thing. I think let's do it. So make Trump the border czar, not the president. Okay?
I don't necessarily agree with you because presidents can't just speak things into action.
Right.
He's got to work with Congress.
Yes.
And this is why his ability to get things on the first vote is up for grabs, because if he doesn't make good on that promise, the whole country's gonna fall. Or if he doesn't get to be on the first vote,
I don't think
based on that issue, we got to go back to immigration to really find out.
Immigration is the most important issue for this country. The reason why it is the most important is because neither of the parties are willing to deal with it. The Democratic Party wants the illegal immigrants to be legalized and become voters, so since they mostly receive government help, even though they are morally conservative, they will become like a 70-30 voting Democrat. That is what the Democratic want. They want to legalize these people. What the Republican Party, not necessarily the voters, but the people, big donors and the business people, they like the cheap labor. Okay, that's the problem. They are the commerce, the Chamber of Commerce is actually behind.
There are some corporations that don't do that. It is, the thing is what is your motivation? And I mean, and lowering cost is the primary purpose of corporations.
Yes, and I think at least the Chamber of Commerce, as representing the business side, they have been standing on the illegal immigrant side. Okay, so in that sense, Chamber of Commerce being typical, usually Republican, now that makes both parties refusing to deal with the issue. So it become a gangrene and growing bigger and bigger. Nobody's taking care of. As part of the church, okay, I actually like to have the opportunity to reaching these people. They are here, we're going to reach out to them. We'll be nice to them, we'll help them. But as a citizen of a country, we know that this country cannot take that kind of bleeding.
Right. Well, and okay, so just for some stats here, I just looked it up just to look. There's 11.3 million unauthorized immigrants in the U.S. as of 2014. That was the stat. 49% of those are Mexican immigrants. So if we build the wall, we are essentially going to take 90% of that, theoretically, 90% of that 49% down. We're still going to have 51% coming in from aircraft.
No.
Other places.
The aircraft is still minimal. The 49% Mexican, but there are a lot of non-Mexicans that also come from the southern border. That I know. I know the Chinese have people, they pay money, they go to Mexico and come in from Mexico. Okay, so the 49% is not accurate. Probably about 90% of those illegals here come from the southern border. Okay, they're not all Mexicans. Okay, a lot of them are Chinese, a lot of them are Middle Easterners, a lot of them are Eastern Europeans.
Well, the Africans as well.
Yeah, a lot of Africans too. So the southern border is the major thing. Some people say, okay, why not northern border? Well, right now that's not a problem. Right? Okay, you deal one problem at a time. You deal with a major problem for now. Okay?
When I lived in Chicago, that was one of the major outlets for immigrants. There's major cities that are designated as immigrant communities, and the interesting thing then was there was a guy, a financial manager out of Iraq, that lived in our neighborhood, but he worked at a gas station. The owner paid him cash under the table because it was cheap labor, and he was doing gas station attendant, but he had everything short of a PhD in financial commerce.
Yeah, actually, I know a guy who was taking his RN. He has a student visa from Britain,
and I tell you,
work. So he found a job where the guy pays him under the table. And
see, that's how it disrupts our system. So everything now is gray area. You cannot. It's not regularly as before. That makes the country great. And I tell you another side effect of the illegal immigrants. It totally disrupted our medical system. Okay, and the illegal immigrants, they go to the emergency care, emergency room. Okay, and emergency room are obligated to treat them, but after treating them, they just walk away. Okay, and who pays the cost? Well, those who have insurance. That's why our insurance rise up so much. Is again because of the illegal immigrants. Okay, and that pushes to the Obamacare, which has spent billions of dollars on the not working website.
$500 million just on the website.
Yeah, and for a non-bidding job, of a classmate of the First Lady.
To David Orzach, who was the first Treasury Secretary under Obama, to send my resume.
But again, see, that is crony capitalism.
You should do that.
This one who got the job was not bidding, and that person was a classmate of the First Lady.
Right.
Okay, think about how much he's going to kick back to the first family.
Well, yeah.
Okay, see, these are all corruptions, but nobody's willing to talk about it because what? They're standing on the right side of history.
Well, and
okay.
you have to make sure you fact check that. I'm gonna look that up real quick just to make sure.
That is true. Okay, so I may not be precise, but I'm generally accurate.
Right.
Things get in my brain, I don't lose it. Okay.
And I generally don't keep everything in my brain, which is why I have it down on paper, which is a better method of accountability.
So that's why I say, the illegal immigrants is not just about, one system, but border. Okay, it's not about a racial issue. It's a disruption of our whole society. In the security issue, because we have a lot of non-Mexicans coming in from the Middle East who, well, many of them included a real problem with this country, and then it disrupts our, suppresses our labor, and it disrupts our Medicare system, disrupts our welfare system, and all of those things are related with one issue.
The question is, we're a free country. Should we allow this disruption? And the magnitude is
is shaking our whole foundation. What we happen here is basically the end of the Roman Empire.
Right, where you've got all the different subsects in Rome. Yeah.
Yeah, the Roman Empire ended because the Roman government became so much welfare oriented. They gave free food to anybody who lived in Rome, and the Romans therefore become very much a welfare dependent, lazy people. They won't study, they don't work, they won't fight. So who will fight? Well, they will hire foreigners to fight. Okay.
Well, we're doing that now. We have private military companies that are.
Well, yeah, and the people who are
in a lot of trouble for some of the stuff that they were doing with using Chinese banks to move money and things like that.
Yeah, and
not good stuff.
We are giving fast way to citizenship for people who fight for the United States military.
Well, I think that's right. I mean,
yeah,
you're gonna fight for our military.
The same thing happened in Rome. But at the end, almost all soldiers, almost all centurions are foreigners.
Yeah.
Okay? And guess what? When they are not treated well, they go back to their own country, they build up their army. They've learned the techniques.
They've learned all the internal
techniques, and they know how the Romans fight. They will fight, and with improvements. And now, then finally, one day, the Roman Empire just collapsed. We are happening in the same way. We're turning into welfare state. We're turning into depending on foreigners.
Trying to discourage us?
Well, history repeats because people don't learn. Okay, people don't learn. Therefore, history repeats. There's nothing new under the sun.
So, what do they need to do? I mean,
that's the scary thing. And my thing is, as human beings, are we capable of doing it? Or are we just destined to live this cycle of progress?
And then collapse. That has always been the pattern. You progress, you collapse. You progress, you collapse.
Yeah, we've done it over and over.
But this century is the last century till now are the only time that the population didn't grow and collapse, and it kept on growing. Okay, because of what? Because the wars have been now kind of many, but small, not so many. Okay, there have always been wars, but our production, the capitalist system, have made the production of food so great that just America alone can feed the whole world. Okay, and but that's a rarity. Generally speaking, in history, the population and economic progress is always growing and then collapse. Okay, disaster and war will collapse, and we have been growing so much. World population is now to over 7 billion now, about 7 billion.
What is over 7 billion?
World population. Okay.
World population.
Yeah.
Okay.
China alone has 1.4 billion. India has 1.1 billion, I think, and the whole West maybe 1 billion, and Muslims have 1 billion, and so on. So, but anyway, right now there's still about 2 billion out of the 7 billion who call themselves Christians. Okay, and then the 1 billion are Muslim, 1 billion are Chinese, and 1 billion are Hindus, and the others are the other billion. So the Christian culture still somewhat dominates the world, but it's shrinking because Europe is getting away from Christianity. America is waning too. So gradually the order of the world will decay. So this progress and prosperity, the ability to feed the world, was created by this Christian democratic capitalist modern society. That once that order breaks, then all disaster will fall. Okay, and all nations will go back, collapse into oblivion. Okay.
You believe that?
No.
Well, that's prophesied in the Bible. It will happen. You like it or not, there will be 7-year tribulation.
I think we will fall again. I fear for that day, and I hope that it doesn't happen. I feel like we have technology enough and we're interconnected enough to maybe stop it before it happens. But it also feels like my generation and even your generation are kind of looking at the pinnacle right above us.
I've got about 25 more years. And, I'm fine. You'll
just leave it.
I'm fine.
I'm there.
You got to worry about it.
If I live to 120, they limit the normal. Still quite some time to go. I mean, half of my life now. But this is. I do believe there are some hope of slowing down the decay and maybe small revivals. Okay, and as I think from the Christian worldview, I know that when people repent their sins and ask for God's mercy and favor, He sends a revival. He changes people. When He changes people, people work better, then the country gets better. Okay, so it starts again from the mind, from the heart. Okay, we have sinned so much that they are definitely have consequences. Okay,
evil is in the world.
Evil, yeah. And if you repent your sins, on the other hand, there could be revival. There'll be forgiveness. There'll be revival, when people will have more peace and less hatred. And more thinking of a solution than trying to killing each other. Okay?
Yeah, but
so
people can be good though. Do we really need the church?
People can be good.
Okay, so just to clarify,
I'm being.
Yeah, I know you're playing the devil's advocate.
There was only a total of $27,000 donated to the Obama campaign from. That's a total that was accounted for all of the CGI employees that worked for that company. Nor did they have any. They did have that relationship at Princeton. She was the vice president and had nothing to do with that job bid. The job bid was actually 4 different companies that bid for the job, and the government had another service or regulatory service that was actually our committee, I guess, that was overseeing that. So there was no direct link.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be direct link. Well, if there is, they won't let you know.
Well, still though,
okay?
No, that's the finance. They took the financial.
And I've heard it's a no bid thing. And why do you say there's a bid?
It says, let's see. With the headlines looming, officials limited the bidders to the winners of the 2007 umbrella contract. So the companies that won that contract are the same companies that got to bid for this.
Yeah, see, that's just a straw man. You don't, until that audit report is out, you really can't tell, which is, another reason why you have to not accept information at face value. And that's a Christian attitude. You do not accept. Man is sinful, and right. That's why Christianity is such a profitable thing to understand.
Because we know men are sinful. We can't trust them unless you verify them.
We had a situation, election back in Chicago, in my own local town. One of the people that was running in a minority ticket prided herself on being the people's representative. But she lived in my homeowners association, but she wasn't paying her homeowners association bill. So I did some research. Sometimes accounting drops over into legal. I found out she had declared bankruptcy, and she was running for political office. Now, Illinois has a rule about you're supposed to report any unpaid taxes when you run for office.
Oh, and a bankruptcy is a huge one.
So it's easy,
Yeah,
I forgot about that. But I'll give you that example to prove your point that you can't accept information on face value.
No.
The internet, especially, people make up things and put up there.
Like I said, they looked at this is
and these are fact checkers that usually by lefty people.
Well, fact checking, facts are facts. I mean, that's just
the whole thing with Hillary Clinton and this email scandal is another perfect example.
Yeah. Now, see, I still think she should be held accountable for that. As an IT person, doing that was completely unsecure.
Mhm.
How dare her put anything that has to do with
There must be a purpose. I still don't understand the purpose. Why would she do
Okay,
that?
let's debate about that.
Well, the thing is, it's not behind a firewall. It wasn't behind a firewall. So that means that email server was open to the world.
Wow.
Anyone in the IT industry knows, even with a firewall, you can hack an email server and get into it, then you have access to everything. That's just common knowledge.
See,
in the IT
there are
industry.
two
And
things I don't understand. One is, why would she do that? There must be a reason. And number two, what's the consequence? You know,
yeah, well, the consequence, I can't remember the exact law. She did break a law. I mean, it was.
Yeah, well, I know that
law.
she actually let out the real name and position of our CIA officers, put them in danger, and that itself is
yeah. I mean, but she should be held accountable for that. Just that lack. I mean, and I'm not saying she did it to be, you know, some type to be harmful in any way. I don't think that she understood the complexity of what she was doing. I think somebody told her, "Hey, it'll probably be easier if we just set this up at home, so you know you don't have to worry about going to the office."
Or is that something that she
She's
can
been a
do
career-
without?
Oh, I know. I'm not.
I mean,
I don't want to
how
make her sound stupid.
Can you
She's not stupid.
rationalize that away? I mean, I know as
Well, no, I
a
hear
professional accountant that I have standards to uphold.
Yeah,
the question
absolutely.
is do you occasionally break them? But the magnitude of what, without being questioned, is
and you know, it may just come down to her just being lazy.
criminal.
No, but
She may
if
have
you
considered-
know her history, you know that it is not without reason,
Right.
and the whole thing is just a self-benefiting. There's some reason behind it. If you know what happened in Arkansas in the scandal of the white water thing, people were bought, and some people are willing to take the fall for her. Okay, and went to prison. Susan McDougal went to prison on her behalf.
What exactly was that? What was it again?
Whitewater, you know, that was a firm, and they did something illegal in water and in buying land, and then the government was designated for something and so on. I don't know exactly, but it was a scandal. It was involved with a firm, and Susan McDougal was the one who went to jail on her behalf. Okay, and she wouldn't say anything, but right before she was released, she died. Okay, and there's another person who just died just in right time. Okay, and I know that Vincent Foster, who also was her counsel, and he conveniently committed suicide once they got into the White House. Okay, so all of these make me very suspicious of everything she does. It is self-benefiting. It is Al Capone-like, mafia-like thing. Okay, and they went from nothing to become billionaires now. How? Well, by this Chris Clinton Foundation, in which the two Clintons go out and speak and get millions of dollars for fees. Why would people pay that fee for connections?
I do like Bernie Sanders asked her to show him the transcript. He's like, that must have been a really amazing speech for $225,000.
Yeah, I mean,
when we see the transcript,
some Chinese will pay $1 million for a 30-minute speech. Why would they pay that? They pay that for connections. And what do the connections get them? Some of the American things, technology and things, and so that they can get rich. I know that Bill Clinton allowed one company to sell a key American rocket technology to China with his approval. It was actually barred by law. He executively approved that. And with that, Chinese rocket technology now matches the U.S. Okay? So I know he sold national interest for personal interest. That's what we have with the Clinton family. Okay, they're not necessarily evil; they're just selfish. Okay, and they will do everything for their own interest. And
you're not evil, but selfish.
Well, selfish is in the sense of self-interest to the level of hurting others. Okay, and the evil is focusing on hurting others intentionally. I don't think they intend to hurting others. That means, in my standards, evil. But I think they can be evil if they feel it threatens their self-interest. Okay, that's why they have let people take their fall in prison and let them die in the right time, commit suicide, and so on. And that is doing evil. But all of those is because of self-interest. Okay, self-interest is not evil by itself. Selfishness to the level of hurting others is evil. Okay, everybody have self-interest.
So how do you? I mean, Donald Trump is seen as not selfish because he gives these good Samaritan ideas. Do you think he has self-interest?
I think so. I think he is a guy who's got enough pleasure from money. He wants the pleasure of knowing to have power. Okay, that's just what it is. He wants to play with power. He says it's my time to do something that make me excited. The other things are, I already know. It's still self-interest.
Who are you voting for? Who are you reading for?
Honestly, I don't know yet. I don't really like.
That's a cop out.
No, I like Kasich. I still like Kasich. I like some of the things he has to say as far as economy-wise.
But Kasich is the one who accepted Obamacare in his state and expanded it.
Yeah, and his state did fine. They did great. I mean,
anybody can survive a state. How do you know? What do you got to base that on? You don't have any numbers.
Well, I mean, let's see. I know I can look it up, but yeah, that's one thing that I wanted to go with Kasich. And honestly, as far as the Obamacare thing goes, a lot of that. I can be frustrated about that because I don't have medical insurance, and if we had implemented the Medicare gap coverage like other states did here in Texas, I would be covered right now. And that's one thing that frustrates me because I work.
And I can understand that.
To try and make a living.
Self-preservation.
Yeah, but you are doing this out of self-interest, not thinking about the whole economy. Right? You know that anything that goes.
I assume that I pay my share, therefore I should at least be able to have those benefits that are there for me.
Yeah, but again, they always they have limits of what they can do. They try to push all the states to do that, but still, America
and you just got bought by the Democratic ticket.
Yeah, well, that's fine.
That's right. You will vote Democratic because
I think it's a wonderful thing to have health care for people. There's nothing wrong with that.
But no, it's wrong because once government participates in the economic activities, there will be corruption. The government will take the lion's share, okay, and the people will get very little. You know that anything welfare that government does, 80% goes to government, 20% goes to people they claim to serve. Okay, the welfare run by, run by the private, 20% goes to the people who work for the organization, 80% goes to the people whom they claim to serve. You see that?
And this is this is to help you swing you over, because I do want to win you over. Now that Cruz is the best candidate. I actually voted for uncommitted here in Texas. I was originally for Mr. Carson because he showed the most steady. Non-demagogue type of language, but he dropped out right before the vote here. The principle here's the thing: you got the facts and figures. You have what you want to do with the money, assuming you got it, and then the purpose. What is the purpose of the federal government? Okay, is the purpose of the government? You've got to decide what is the purpose of federal government. If it is the primary purpose to redistribute wealth, no problem with Mr. Kasich. But if you believe that there's a principle at work here, and that is a biblical principle
and constitutional principle,
of limiting government, because in the eyes of Christ, all people are to be loved, but the money thing is just a secondary thing. What is the purpose of our life here on earth? If you believe it's for self-preservation, it's basically down to somebody that wants to continue the healthcare system as is. If you believe there's a greater purpose, which is having a meaning for life that goes beyond what your short temporary suffering is, then you got to look to Ted Cruz for the moment. I mean, and that's
because I'm not saying Ted Cruz is bad. I will say I have a really bad problem with his stand on abortion, because we solved that issue in the 70s. Women should be allowed to have a legal,
and that's not going to change anytime soon.
He can't change that. He wants to try to
let him try, but I don't think I don't think.
See, without Supreme Court
job here in Texas of eradicating it.
Well, he's not the reason to do that. It's the voters and that get our legislature to do that. He has
when you have politicians in place that are speaking that way, it forces people.
How does that historically? Can you prove that point?
Well, just in the media. I mean, look at the media. They fuel anger on Donald Trump. Everybody talks about Donald Trump. Ted Cruz gets on TV and he says, I'm completely against abortions. I think we should get rid of it all. I think it's evil. God doesn't want us killing babies.
Well, that is true.
And then you have a lot of people sitting at home who are subjected to that and with unknowingly.
But that's the people's will, okay? And that's even because they have a conscience that is not seared,
right?
Okay, just to think about.
We already had this debate years ago, and it was resolved.
But no, it was wrongly resolved.
But it was resolved by the people, and now
the
people is resolving it again. Okay, see, you are for
parliamentary procedure.
You are
reconsider a vote.
You are supporting that the Constitution is a living, breathing document.
Well,
if you say that, then you just cancel that. You said even the Constitution can change. Why can't people change their policies on abortion?
I'm not saying that they can't change the policy on abortion. I'm saying it's wrong to do it. After doing it for 30 plus years and women having those financial benefit, or not financial benefit, but having the medical
financial benefits.
Yeah. So having the medical
aid-dependent children.
Having that
pay people to kill their own babies.
It doesn't work that way. No one is that evil. These women are hurt. They don't want to have this child. They need some way to get rid of it. And rather than shoving a coat hanger in themselves and making themselves bleed out, they go to a doctor.
They could have given such a child birth and life, a chance,
That's
a choice.
Not our decision to make for them. That's their decision.
No, they don't have the right to decide for the child. The child has a right to choose.
There has to be open debate on this.
No, I agree with me.
They are depriving somebody's life as being for their life as living. Right. See, life as being, it has higher value than life as living.
Yeah, that's fine. That's all fine.
They are doing the wrong thing.
My point is, it's ultimately her choice. It's not your choice to put on her that because your God doesn't believe it, she's not allowed to do it. That is not a free.
No, it's just not funded by federal dollars.
As long as they're not using that money, okay?
With their theological, and there was no spending, no expenditures on anything like that.
No.
We know that when they talked to Congress, they looked at
they
there is no money going to.
That's a lie. That's a lie. Absolutely lie. That's a lie. Understand? Okay, you give money to the same company who frees up the money to do abortion.
Giving money to those.
They're giving hundreds of millions of dollars to that corporation, and they free up the other money to do abortion. And you say it's not direct spending? That's lie.
I will show you the facts. Just like I will show you.
No matter what you saw, it's common sense. Lie.
But you can't deny fact. You can't deny.
The fact is, if you give me $10 for let's say doing gas, I can free up my $10 to do some other things on drugs. Okay, same company. The money for one thing, free me up for doing something else. It's common sense. Why don't you see that?
Because
this is life. You are using numbers to deny the value of life.
No, I'm giving a woman the choice.
You are giving the woman the choice to kill another person who has different DNA. That's another person. That's not part of her body.
But you're putting this in a perspective as if we say no, that they're just going to listen. They're not going to listen. They're going to have that abortion either way. So regardless if they have the medical facilities to do it or not, they are going to have that abortion. And
a lot of them can be persuaded not to have it.
I just had that happen in Abilene, where a young woman flushed her newborn child down the toilet after they stabbed it 27 times because they didn't want the child. Would you rather something like that happen or have a first trimester fetus aborted?
I'd rather have the person to give the child for adoption. There are many families who are waiting for adopting kids.
They can't do that. They just can't. Some women can't dedicate 9 months to give up out of their career for an accident.
Well, then you allocate money for women to do that. Give them free housing. Christians do that.
Yes,
we have houses for these women to do that. It's not that we're not doing that.
I know, and it's great, but what I'm saying is when there's things like that, and you still can't take away someone's right to choose.
No, their right to choose to kill another person is not their right.
We gave them that right in the 70s when we
shouldn't have given them right. That is
they now have that right.
When
we shouldn't have given it to them, maybe, but they have that right.
No, they can be. It's given. It can be taken away. Okay. Yeah, things can change. Use the Constitution even can change.
Right,
okay?
But I say it's not fair to change that.
No, it's not fair for the child in the first place.
The child doesn't exist. The child is a depiction of a life that could be. It is not a life as it
The child's DNA exists. It's human DNA.
Right.
Okay? The child is a potential life. Yes, grant that.
Yeah.
But the child is another person, not the same person. Okay? No, some biology.
I don't know.
That's a different person, not the same person.
This is the hard part.
That's because you claim to be scientific, you're not consistently scientific because your ideology
combined in this conversation. There's so much emotion in it.
Because I know what happened. I know, you know what? I confess on national TV. I just confessed to the church. I am a murderer of my potential brother and sister. Because when my mother was pregnant with the second child, she asked my grandmother whether she will raise the child as raising me. My grandmother said she has no energy. The final vote was mine. My mother asked me, do you want to have another sibling? Okay? And I said, no, I want all the attention from my parents. And out of my self-interest, I pushed my mother to abort another potential brother and sister. In that sense, I am forever guilty of feeling as a murderer.
Right.
And that's wrong.
Just like
that's wrong. I mean, I don't have to hold guilt anymore. I know I'm forgiven.
Right.
I'm in Christ.
Somebody who has
just wrong.
Right. But that is a person's. That's for a person themselves to deal with that guilt. A woman herself is going to deal with that guilt. There's no way, I'm sure there's some women that take advantage of that and they're, promiscuous and are doing it.
It certainly opens the door. It opens the gateway for the men to be irresponsible. Okay?
But what's next? No birth control? I mean, are we really trying to...
birth control is, for me, it's not wrong. Okay?
If we were under parliamentary
abortion,
I would be given the chance before either of you guys could speak again.
Okay. You should. I'd like to hear your opinion on it. Just because you kind of said silently do that. But what is your opinion on it?
I'm passionate on this because there's life.
As you should be.
There's life. There's life at work, at the stake. Okay? And life as being is the highest value that can be. You got to respect life, marriage, and property for society to be normal. If you don't respect the highest value of life, no society can be normal or just, and the whole society will be punished, and everybody will suffer when the whole society gets punished.
The one pro of it, though, is population control to an extent.
Again, that's a myth. That's a myth. You're assuming that when you have more people and then the pie is the same, everybody gets a smaller slice. But the reality is, if the society is right, then you make bigger pies. Everybody have the same amount.
What is right?
The right things we have already learned through history to the Christian democratic capitalist society. It produces things in everything enough.
According to a higher authority.
Right.
We always have great debates on what's called ethics, which is people coming together and agreeing man to man on what needs to be done. We have a Supreme Court that's figuring here. What we're not asking people to play is there a spiritual dimension? Okay, and if you look at life and earth and the creation of this world, you cannot ignore the intelligent design that went into it. Whether you believe that's God or some cosmic force or whatever, there was a greater force in here. And it's not just about life, but I agree with you 100% on this, but the question is will people continue to go down the path where there is no relationship with God? Because then we have no course but to denigrate into survival of the fittest.
Well, see, and that's one thing I've always wondered is if humans, as our nature itself, do we have to have some type of religion or higher power in order to exist together? It seems like that. If you look at societies and civilizations that have existed, there's always been some type
All
of
societies have a culture, a belief, or worldview that unites them. That's what they make a culture. Okay.
Right.
See, in the Chinese word, okay, in the word to form a society, okay, that's called 社会, okay, and the word 社 is actually it's an altar with something on the altar. It's a sacrifice, and the other side is the dirt. So the dirt has an altar, on a hill, okay, dirt hill. There's an altar worshiping, and the word 会 is man. Meeting in the field under the sun. So what is a society according to the Chinese? When they made these characters in about 2000 BC at the time of the Tower of Babel. Okay, so what is a society? It is people meeting in the field, gathered together on the hill, and then around an altar worshiping something.
Yeah, because the Chinese had almost like a mythology as well, because they had like Hou-Yi and some of the other Chinese gods. I can't remember all of them. I just remember Hou-Yi, but
I don't know what you're talking about.
he was basically like the equivalent of like the sun god for China or the Chinese.
Okay, maybe you didn't pronounce it right, but
probably not. It's Houye or Y-I.
Okay, but anyway, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, the culture recognize
a deity,
a supreme being,
yeah.
a deity that people that allowed them to come together and form a civilized society.
Right.
If you don't have that, then your recourse is to denigrate into chaos and civil war.
No, and I agree completely. And the scary thing for me is like I don't need to attest to that in order to understand right and wrong or to have that moral view because I was raised with it. So I kind of have that moral input was already there when I was raised. But me not believing in anything doesn't necessarily lead me astray. But I can see how some people that do believe in something, if they didn't have that, boy, oh boy, would they be in trouble. And I think that's a scary thing to an extent because I think people, I hate to say it, but like people almost need to be able to live without that higher power, I feel, in order to...
Well, and people do, but they live 10 years less than Christians.
Really?
You look it up.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've heard that statistic before.
The Christian deity is different with other deities, is that the Christian deity is based on love. Therefore, it doesn't force people to believe it. Okay,
right.
It blesses people who believe it. Okay, and that's the difference between other deities, where they force people to believe them or else, right? And most
Old Testament God, man, he was pretty.
No, Old Testament God only did that to the Canaanites, not because they didn't believe in God.
They did it at the Exodus out of Egypt too, when he killed them.
Yeah, but that's because they were killing Israelites.
Right.
There was justice. Okay.
Yeah, and it's not like he didn't give them a chance.
Right. They gave him 5 in the 10 plagues. 5 times the Pharaoh hardened his own heart.
Right.
The later 5, God said, "I will harden your heart so that you will be fully punished." Okay, it's all justice. Okay, for the Canaanites, the elimination of Canaanites is not because they didn't believe in God. Actually, a lot of them later survived because the Israelites didn't kill all of them. But it's not because of their belief, but because of their sin, that they killed their firstborn children. They are all murderers, and the only just treatment for murderers is death penalty.
Right.
See, if it's a nation of murderer, then a nation, the death penalty for the whole nation. That's why there's the so-called genocide of or the holy war against Canaanites. It's not because of their beliefs. It's because of their sin, and the sin is taking away life. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, America has taken away so many innocent lives through abortion, then the whole country could be under God's ban, in other words, wiping out.
Well, and the thing is I know your mind is probably going, well, we got too religious with the 1930s and the banning of alcohol, right? And look,
well, that was
not a religious thing. That was actually the progressives who did it. Okay.
Well, it was a push by the women. I mean, a lot of the women were.
Yeah, because their husbands
were coming home drunk and beating them. Or
okay. Well, bad example. But the thing is, we have a choice here as a nation in this next election, and are we in agreement that the culture is at the center, not immigration, but culture, and culture is for preservation of life.
Life, marriage, and property are the three most important values in any normal human society. If you disrespect them, everybody will suffer. Okay? This is not individual thinking. This is not imposing on some people. This is collective for the whole.
So there's a continuum out there of saying this is denigrated society. This is where America was at apex in terms of life, lots of people middle class, doing well, adjusting to life. You can't eliminate poverty, but they're there, and then we are slowly moving farther along the continuum. And will our president that's elected, where will he be on it? Because then that's where we will gravitate to.
Right. No, I hear you on that, and that's one reason why I don't like Sanders and really the Democratic side of it at all in this election, just because.
Well, the Democratic took God out of their platform.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Look it up.
Well, see, again, they do that to, I guess, try to bid for my generation, because that's really what it seems like they do.
And that's fine.
I mean,
we're giving you free education.
Bernie Sanders walking
great
around.
Jobs at $10
I
an
don't know
hour.
who implemented the fast food stuff into our legislation, so I don't know who did that, but that may have been another president way back. I don't know.
Maybe, I don't know. I think you have.
I think I think from the 1980 till now, America has about 20% less people believing in God. Okay. And but same amount believe they should go to heaven. So without God,
right?
Just
that's Pew Research. I actually subscribe to Pew Research. I don't know
very
but
confused.
Not all of their issues are great, but
you have to look at how many people.
And so right now, America used to have about 80% of people believe in God. Okay, and then right now that is starting to drop. Okay, and many of those who claim to believe in God have believed in a very watered down version of God, and they don't really know God. They don't really know the Bible, so their worldview are now changing.
And they don't think that their economic situation requires intervention from.
Yeah, they're comfortable, so they don't feel they need God, and that's another.
I got my iPad and my games, and
my main thing is I don't. In my mind, I just don't see it as a reality, so I can't just believe in it, and that's it's not that I think any ill of it or anything like that.
The reason you don't believe is because you refuse to listen to the good arguments, which I have presented to you. The arguments of design. The technology. Can any monkey jump on your board and make a design of a new iPad? Randomly. No, it won't happen. It takes intelligence to design things so that laws come out, orderly things come out. The universe has order. The universe's order is decreasing. So how did the first order come from? It must be somebody who has the brain and designed it. That's the argument of design. Okay, it's plain for any rational people, and especially the techie, scientific oriented people.
And this is true for Christians as well as non-Christians, I think, because when I started studying about the money from a biblical perspective, I was in your court. I thought, you just we can use these principles about money and investing to make our decisions. But the more I looked at it, I started telling myself that, well, how does this principle of accountability work? The parable of what changed my mind was one parable, and that is the parable of the unjust steward. don't know if you know that one, but that's the one where the manager comes in and he finds out that his chief financial manager is not collecting, he's allowing his vendors to not pay their bill, right? I mean, that's so he's got more accounts receivable. He's letting them float money
because that's not with his own money, with his boss's money.
His boss's money.
Yeah. If it's his own money, he's okay to do that. That's right. His boss's money, he doesn't have the right to do it. But he's using his boss's money for his own interest because he wants to earn the favors so that when he's out of the job, he will be treated well.
I had a situation where I had in a company, and that was the one I told you about turning around, where they had a lot of people that owed them money. And the question is that I was going to go choke. And this is another parable where takes them, just give me that money. I said, how can this be? Well, it's not my money.
Right.
And the culture is what money you have, it's not yours, according to the cultural perspective of Christians. God gives it to you to give honor to Him and do the things like marriage, life, and property. When you don't use it for those purposes, then you're under a judgment, though you may not feel it. It's
life, marriage,
but you're more likely to be frustrated from life because you don't see that benefit. So what I started doing is I said, well, what's my responsibility about this money for this company that I work for? And I said, well, you got to go after them. I did a crazy thing though. I brought in my sales guy that was selling to these customers, and I said, what's going on? Well, if I tell him he has to pay, then he won't buy from us anymore.
He's not buying it from us now.
And I made this list, and this was after 9/11. So I said, I made this list, and it was all the companies that owed us money. And at the bottom, I put Osama bin Laden. I said, it's not your decision whether to collect that money. I mean, it's your patriotic duty. And for me, that confirmed that the Bible gives us great guidance on how to handle money, but it's not for our selfish purpose. God gives us and rewards us based on our obedience to Him. And that's what gives me life, to be able to say, I've saved a company because I took my responsibility seriously. And when you don't have any responsibility to God, then you're left to your self-interest. Not that you don't have self-interest, because you have life, you have a financial responsibility. You have to feed yourself.
Self-interest is not evil. Selfishness, which opens evil, opens hurting others. That's where sin. Self-interest is justified. Selfishness is sin, and hurting others is evil.
And so that's the decision about this. What is self-interest? I think would help put it in perspective for you.
Yeah.
So self-interest in trying to benefit your own life, but if that goes to hurting others, like abortion is a woman for her self-interest, her life, her feeling, whatever, and she goes to hurting the life as being of another person, that in my mind is evil. Because it's not about restricting ourselves, it's about hurting another person, and to the ultimate about
abortion is an ugly thing.
Not only ugly, it's evil. It's hurting another person.
We have an agreement that something's not right about it.
Yeah.
And that is, and we need, for that reason, we need to have an extended debate. The question is what is the candidates going to do about that?
Right.
And how
when Trump says, okay, now he's gotten wiser. Instead of falling in the trap, he's saying, okay, now the women shouldn't be punished. It should be the doctor who get punished. But hey, that may be politically wiser, but think about it. Intellectually, it doesn't stand. If I hire you to kill him, who should be punished? Both of us, and actually the court usually will give you a deal to convict me, Okay, it's a murder for hire. Okay, and the one who hires should be punished. Okay, the murderer and the hirer. Okay, intellectually doesn't stand as long as you recognize the one who get killed is a person.
Well,
okay,
and I think like you said originally, you kind of had to do that in order to not get too much backlash.
No,
he was getting some serious backlash when he came out and said he was going to start punishing women for.
Well, that's because it was a hypothetical question. If abortion is legal, is illegal. I mean, that's hypothetical.
I hate when they take things out of context like that. It is the most frustrating thing about watching TV ever.
But you should call them out on that. I would email
that's
the
what
this is where you put your practical application to a combat. But because we're afraid to speak in public, or
that we don't have enough say,
they're being called an idiot, and that's the other things that happen even on the local level, city council. You don't know what you're talking about, right?
Right.
Okay. If you stand on principle, there's no way that can hurt you.
I got you.
Yeah, the principle is something that's always right. You always know, because that's foundational.
Yeah. But if you stand on purpose or direction of things, those are lower orders. So that is where people can hold their head high and not be complaining. That's why I was able to write the letter to, what's going on here? Why is he saying you're out of options, but you hold a AA credit rating? It's stupid. Somebody's wrong.
Yeah. Somebody not telling the truth. So, on that kind of subject, how would you, we're getting into our world right now, and the medical industry is really pushing for genetic altering and things like that, where we're able to manipulate genes to change certain attributes in the body, and even pre-fetal, we can change genes to stop, certain
mutations, diseases. Right.
Do you see that as being acceptable in the Christian worldview? Is that something, because technically you're altering, what God made to an extent. So would you let that child come out with its deformity naturally, or use that medical science to alter that child with a chance of, there is a chance of death there, like anything
Again,
else?
it has to be a capitalized approach. Right. You can't subsidize, because then that breeds corruption and this thing. That's not an area. Health is not where our government should be.
Right. The same thing that goes with the GMO or genetically modified objects. Okay, the big corporations as Monsanto, they have modified the genes of a lot of the food, wheat and corn especially, and they put some genes in there to prevent the disease it's basically insect. What do you call them? Insecticide, right? Yeah, they built it in there, and they have tested themselves. The FDA allowed them to test those things, and they say it's not harmful for humans. Okay,
it's only poison. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's only poison for the bugs. It's not poison for humans. Why? Because we've tested humans for a few months, and there's nothing. Okay, but the long-term one actually comes later. I mean, right now, a lot of Americans are having problem with allergy. A lot of them have problem with the
even digestive tract issues are a big thing.
Yeah, and I suspect that it has something to do with the GMOs, but they were fighting hard to prevent it from being labeled. Okay, and the FDA is letting them go. Why? Well, I guess it's those people donate to the candidates, and lobbying it. So again, it goes to the government participating in economic activity. I'm not saying it shouldn't in this case, okay? But once government participating, then there's lobbying, there's corruption, and there is harm for the people. Okay, right. So government should be kept as much as possible from economic. Governments exist to do national defense and to do social justice in the sense of killing the murderers. Right. Okay, and so that murderer will think twice. Okay, and justice is what government for. Economic prosperity, let the people free. They will all work for themselves, and the society will be prosperous. Okay, and as long as you prevent people from getting prosperous by hurting other people, okay, then they can only get prosperous by serving other people. Then the whole country gets better. Okay, so justice is what government does. preventing people from hurting others, then get prosperous. Okay, so I cannot get rich by stealing your things. Okay, the only way I can get rich is by making something and you like it, you buy it from me. Then I get rich and you get things, okay, to do things, and everybody get happier through the free trade. You see, that's why Christian democratic capitalist, the three legs of modern civilization, not all of them need to be there. Then you have a prosperous society. Okay.
So how do you change the, I guess, the outlook that people have when they think about Christianity? Because a lot of people, when they think about it, they just go, oh.
Because they've been deceived. Number one, they have been told that the science has proved the Christian God doesn't exist. Science not only doesn't prove, it has proven the other way. It's more and more evidence saying there are so many laws in the universe. It's so awesome. It's so complicated. None of them can come by themselves. The more laws scientists discover, the more evidence for the existence of God. That's one deception. The greatest design is DNA. Okay, it's so complicated it doesn't come by itself. If you leave DNA in nature by themselves, they all decay into simpler things. None of them will become more and more complicated and become a full-grown biological being. Okay, so number one, they are deceived, and number two, they have been maligned. Okay, they always say, okay, the God of the Old Testament is so inhumane and so on, and they take it out of context. What God ordered Israel to do to Canaanites, it's a judgment for their sin because they are murderers. Okay, for murderers, you have to give them death penalty so that no people will murder again. Okay, and that's not the harshness of God. That actually is the mercy of God. So these things, when people deceive, they take things out of context. They remove the connections of knowledge. They separate it into different realms. So everybody is specializing in only one realm and not the other. You see, I am a scientist as well as a humanities, theology, things. So I know both sides, so that's why I can connect these things. But modern people have been so specialized and disconnected, so people can be easily deceived by somebody who claims that I'm an expert in the other field, which you don't know. You don't know what you're talking about. Right. So I'm telling you.
Even in the field of accounting, there's a mark of Christianity. The whole thing about accounting is called double entry or double-sided accounting, where you can see that. And then that was developed actually by a monk called Pacolo, something like that. Mm-hmm. You can look up the beginnings of accounting. Nice. But it was somebody that had a religious context training on deity.
I thought it was a Jew who did it. It was a monk.
It was a monk, yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Now, a question for you, just because you're kind of informed on the legislation side of things. Can you give like a rundown on the state of our lobbying system as it sits in the United States? Because it's something that I think a lot of people hear all the time, but they don't fully understand what exactly lobbyists are there for and how they're supposed to work and how they're working now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like to think I'm well informed, but I'm gonna. I don't think I can really speak well enough to that area. I do know people that now go regularly to the state and speak on that. Lobbying is one of these. But from what I've learned, my perspective is the question is lobbying legitimate, or is it corrupt as what you hear on the news?
Yeah.
And I guess I am trying to stay close to Senator Perry to see what that happens. Certainly with some of our national level, like I have written Congressman Ryan, what's his first name? I can't remember. Paul Ryan. Mm-hmm. I've written him a couple of times. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I like the way that he quietly was digging into his books and would present things, but now he's got a different role.
Right.
So I am still forming an opinion, I guess, is where I would say. But the way that it's supposed to work is non-general. But the question is there's such big money behind some of those.
You know, I
cannot help but believe there's an element of corruption.
I believe that one thing you can do actually is doable. It's as related to your questions to why people have the wrong impressions about Christianity, and that part of it is because educational system have been dominated by the non-believers and who take the religion away, and then with that also a lot of ethics away from the education system. And one thing that can be solved is because that you can get the education to be totally voucher based. Okay, since this, you know, there are three levels of funding. There is local funding, there's state funding, there's national funding. Okay, and just divide them equally among all of the students of the same grade. Everybody's entitled to a certain amount from local, from state, from the federal government, and then let the parents choose which school the student wants to go, and then the school can decide to accept or not accept. But finally, if the school will have to attract the parents to come to send their student to their school, they will have to present something good about their school.
Right.
Okay, and they will not do something to upset the parents.
Right.
Okay,
Like low achievement.
Low achievement and political correctness.
We do,
you know,
see
same gender.
We do
you know,
see
bathroom.
that, though,
you know,
because I mean, you see. Even in some of the universities where they'll hide, you know, rape cases just so that they don't show.
There are ways to deal with them.
With the award scholarships to our legislature, there was if you go to empowerment.texas, they'll talk about a case where some of the legislatures were having their children get scholarships to the prestigious law schools.
Wow.
and giving them free tuition basically as an outside source. Well,
that's corruption. There are ways to deal with it. I'm just saying the general way of dealing with the education now controlled by a cabal of people who controls the teachers' union, who are generally left-leaning. They're anti-Christian. They're anti-religion. They're anti-Christian ethics.
Right.
And they
80% of your tax dollars locally go to schools.
Right.
And so the thing is Texas is a fairly warm toward
homeschooling,
alternate schooling.
Yeah. But why not make it totally, let's say, equal right?
Isn't it like that in New York where they have separate schools like that you apply for? And
I don't know. Right now we already have
pretty highly controlled.
Yeah, right now in Texas you have options. You can have private school, charter school, or public school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you do have options. But the difference is right now people who are in the private school, they cannot take public money, because once they take public money, they're afraid of being controlled with the strings.
Right.
Okay, and therefore it's very difficult for people who go to send kids to the private school because it's very expensive.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and therefore the highly high care education, which I think is private school. They usually have smaller class, more personal care for the students. Okay, the high care education, which generally will guide the students who are not necessarily so good in the ability, but guide them to achieve pretty well. Okay, but that kind of education now is reserved only for those who can afford. See, the poor, even the relatively, I can consider myself now poor, but I can't afford any kids in private school.
Oh,
okay?
Right.
Yeah. So why not say equal for everybody? Every kid of the same grade is entitled to certain money, and let them go to whatever school, and all schools are equal. And then the schools will design your curriculum for certain people. Some school maybe say, I'm just totally trade school.
Yeah, and see, that's what I think is is needed badly in the U.S. More of those high school trade schools.
Yeah.
For those kids that aren't planning on going.
That's right. I mean, why train everyone to go to college when not everybody is gifted the same way or have the same interest?
Yeah, or have the income available to do that.
I mean, and it doesn't make sense. People are made individually different.
Right.
Okay, and the difference actually is a glory of God. It's a diversity. It's good. People are not divided by their talents necessarily on math. Okay,
Right.
The people who are no good in math can be really good. Even people who have, I would say, Down syndrome, they have the same kind of face. Okay, but Down syndrome people can be very good with words. They just have no brain for math. Okay, okay. They have the same value as humans. Okay, you can send them to do just that kind of thing they are good at. Okay, and then they can be just as contributive to society as people who are good at math and go to science schools. Okay, and there are some
Maybe they
people,
can help with journalism.
yeah, right. They'll be honest, definitely. Down syndrome are honest. Okay?
I think what sounds like we learned from the show is we definitely need to go stand up and vote.
Yeah, and there are ways to deal with our problem. There are solutions.
Don't be afraid to vote.
Yeah, and American people have, done a lot of sins. We have become dumber and lazier, and we deserve a lot of the trouble. But on the other hand, the American people still, I think, has the greatest potential of talents and the freedom and the ability to do great things. And all the problem America face can be solved if we just let our brain work and stop hurting one another. Stop trying to be extreme just to get more clicks. Okay?
That's always my main thing.
Yeah. Deal with the real problem.
Get rid of the rhetoric, if you will. Well, guys, it's been 3 hours, so
Wow,
I think
that went fast.
Yeah. Well, Doug, please let people know again who you are and plug your book again.
Okay.
They know when that's coming out.
All right. Yes, I am a member of the American Parliamentarian Institute, the American Institute of Parliamentarians, and a local precinct judge. I operate as a accountant for many entities, and thank you very much. Now, you're going to release this on the web already?
Yeah, it's live.
Right, it's live.
Right,
It's
right.
there.
In about an hour, it'll be up where you can watch it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. Thank you, Doug. And
Oh, and my book, yes.
Oh, yes.
Look for now that I've committed, I've got to get out in the next 6
Yes,
weeks. Why I don't have money, and the 5 principles of making money.
I think
the
your
right
publisher
place
might
in
want to force you to change the title. Why I can't have money.
Awesome. Well, you guys keep an eye out for that. And I'm sure, Doug, you're on Facebook probably.
I am looking on LinkedIn as well.
There you go. All right. Well, you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
God bless you and God bless America.